I am Aryeh Halivni, along with Peleg, Levy, and Eitan Wetzler. We are in the Ritz-Carlton in Herziliya. It is June 6th, 2018, and we are here to hear about Nathan and Esther Maidenbaum. Why don't we start? We'll just go around, everybody will introduce themselves, say a little bit about their names, maybe when they were born, where they're living, and then we can start about your parents.
Okay. Hi, my name is Rachell Maidenbaum Gober. I'm the third child of Esther and Nathan Maidenbaum. My name is Rachell. Actually, all of us had Hebrew names. I was born in 1947 in Brooklyn, but I actually came here. My mother was pregnant with me in 1947 on her first return trip to Israel, where she was born in April, and that was my first taste of Israel, although I don't quite remember it. And my first memories of Israel are that we didn't grow up learning any American nursery rhymes. My first songs were in Hebrew. We learned Hinei Rakevet, we learned Hashafan HaKatan, and we felt that our place wasn't quite in America. We thought everybody was Jewish, of course, but Israel was our homeland, although we lived in Brooklyn, New York. And my sister was born exactly a year and 11 days after I was, Tamar.
So I'm Tamar. I was born in 1948. I'm the fourth of Esther and Nahum's 6 children. What I could say is, if I could use the Hebrew expression, "Anachnu nichnachnu al birkei hatzionut." Everything was Am Yisrael, Eretz Yisrael, Torah Yisrael, Sfat Yisrael. And I finally did move to Israel 31 years ago. And Baruch Hashem, I think my parents would have been very happy to see their grandchildren living and their children living out their dream.
Thanks. Okay. I'm Dassi Maidenbaum Schreiber. I am the eldest of the girls. We do have an older brother, Aryeh, but I was born in 1945, June 5th, just as the World War II was ending. And I lived in Borough Park till I was 10, and then we moved to the 5 towns, to Lawrence, Long Island. And also my recollections are totally of being read to by my mother, Hebrew nursery rhymes, my father singing at the table, not just Mirot on Shabbat, but all of the Zionistic songs that related to Eretz Yisrael and the hope and the vision and the dreams for the future of Israel, and also songs of the Lechi and the Palmach and anything related to the land of Israel.
I'm Shalom Maidenbaum, born September 18th, 1958. I'm the youngest of the 6 of us. We're an older brother, 4 sisters, and me. Just as a brief introduction, we all experienced different aspects of our parents. My father was very talented in many areas in business, and more than a natural business sense, he had an extreme love of the Hebrew language and anything Israeli, political, and modern, Tanachic. He was a very well-rounded, educated man who got his early education in a Zionist school system in Poland called Tarbut. Later on, he went to study in a gymnasia called Tachkamoni, where Rabbi Soloveitchik, I believe, was the rabbi, the principal. And then he wound up in America, being rejected for a dorm room from YU. So he became a peddler, and he used to joke around how he would have been a rabbi had he had a dorm room. But that was him, and our mother was born in Mea Sharim in Israel and left Israel in 1926. She was very young. She was 9 years old when she came to America. With difficulty, she learned English, but mastered it after a year. And she became a Hebrew typist at the JNF.
Trilingual.
A trilingual. Right.
Hebrew.
Yeah, we still have, I don't have it with me, but we have letters that she typed in Yiddish from the 1930s, and she was very much always concerned with her family here. And she came from a Hasidic background. Karlina Hasidim. My father was more from a Mitnag background, but they had one thing in common, and that was Hebrew. And
Israel.
And Israel.
What I'd like to start with is and I don't know, you can decide who answer and who's gonna join in, but to get a sense of your parents' background, where they came from, how many generations back do you know your parents' story? How many generations, where they came from, where did you know your grandparents, great-grandparents, etc.? So that's generally the first question, to try and put this people in context of where the families are really from. So I don't know who wants to start.
Had we had our cousin here, first
of all, when Rachel was saying we have a cousin, Tzvi, who's like the family genealogy, but we don't need him here.
No.
We're blood
okay.
But I would set something up with you with Tzvi. He's a wealth of information about all sorts of things.
Right. Too many things.
But you're on video.
But generationally, how many, you would know
Well,
that?
we
Well, I
started
know
out
from
in
Tzvi-
Machanayim in 18...
Yeah, well, let's split our parents'
grandparents.
families. They're
Ima.
very, very different backgrounds, and yet there was a tremendous commonality.
Start with Ima's
So
generation.
Ima,
you know the
Savta
story.
Leah.
Savta Leah was the family. Savta Leah's, in other words, our great grandparents were from Leszczyńsk in Poland. Okay, we were
From the maternal
Elimelech,
side.
where Elimelech was the Rebbe there, and they were chosen. And I know this only because I read the book that our cousin wrote, Hakala, about our family. They were chosen one of 10 families to leave Poland by Rothschild. They had some money and they were Zionists to come to Israel and settle in Rosh Pinah
What year was this?
in the 1800s. So
In
late-
1890s,
late,
I heard.
No,
yeah.
1890 was Machanayim.
No,
Then they
18
moved.
according to Tzvi,
They moved.
Before that,
1892, they wound up in
Machanayim.
Machanayim.
But before that,
Because
they ended up...
They were in Rosh Pinah.
No, Machanayim.
No, they were in Rosh Pinah, but there was a big scam there. The people that were running this program, somebody was not on the up and up and took the money of these 10 people, and they were left with very little. So then they moved to Machanayim.
Is that true?
Yes.
I know about Machanayim. It was a failed, one of the unfortunately failed settlements because there was the plague, and there was a book called Avodah Kadachat V'Rav that described the early settlers in Machanayim. Half of them died, and those that survived wound up in Rosh Pinah and
The
Tzfat.
opposite, Tzfat.
And they ended
went
up
to
in
Tzfat.
Tzfat.
The last
So-
place was Tzfat.
So what I know is that our grandmother wound up in Tzfat when she was 9 months old.
Right.
Eventually,
And her father and uncles, they were very quick to learn. Actually, they had to learn from the Arabs how to grow wine, how to grow grapes to make wine. My mother's grandfather and great uncle, one of the first to sell wine to Carmel Winery, because they had no choice. They had to make a living. But yet they were learned, and yet they rode on horses with rifles to protect, their family and the area there. So it was a very, very difficult life, very difficult, because they had pogroms, they had the British there watching over them and favoring the Arabs. So they really struggled, but they kept their family together, and they kept their ideology intact and their values, and they were very family conscious.
What about her father's family?
That's a different story. That's from
the
Meir Sharma.
Kirschenbaums were from up north.
Right.
That's what Dassi's talking about, and they were actually more learned,
Right.
more
Right.
rabbinical,
Right.
and they, in fact, Donnie,
They were
Dassi's
Sanzer
son,
Hasidim. They were Sanzer.
told me that one of the tombstones of one of the
Oh yes,
great
this is
uncles
important. Forgot.
says Mitzeh Tza'eh
Hashach,
like
right. He is Shalom Shabtai, okay? You know, Shabtai HaKohen, the Shach. Every member in the family, going back generations, has a Shabtai and an Esther. My mother was Esther, because Esther was the Shach's daughter. So we emanate from the daughter. But in the family history, if you look back, you'll see there's always an Esther and a Shabtai, and Esther and a Shabtai. So he's our representative of the Shach.
And we actually have pictures of that.
Yes.
Great-grandparents.
Right.
Anyway, they wound up with the shidduch of Savta Leah.
Right. Because
comes with our grandfather from Leah Sharon.
Because her mother
was a shatchanit.
Leah's mother, our grandmother's mother, was a shatchanit. Hudas, her name was. I happened to be named for her. She also sold jewelry and made shidduchim to help her husband have time to learn, so she could, help support the family. She even went so far as, this is a true story, as having her husband and the rabbi of Tzvat sign a document that when she passes away, she joins him in Olam Haba for the schar of letting him learn. And she took the star and wrapped it in a glass container and wore it around her neck. And she told her grandson, and this happened when she passes away, to take that off her neck and bury it with her, so that she has proof in the next life.
It
So-
happened.
to sew it in the-
You found out from
So
the
the
Olam Haba?
Rabbi
You
Gallen?
found out from Olam Haba?
No, it happened that
No, yes, no, I
the
know that.
grandson took it off her neck
No, I
and
just wanted
hid
to
it.
know if you had empirical evidence that it actually
I
happened.
think she had
No,
it sewn
you
into
misunderstand
her
what I'm saying.
No, I know
top.
that. I'm not misunderstanding.
No, she didn't.
Just
I
some
didn't-
light humor.
Yeah, no, she had it taken off her neck secretly by this grandson, and he buried it with her because she was so
It's actually
adamant.
told in that book.
In the book.
It's, the
Yeah,
book called Kala.
Right.
The whole story about how she demanded that she share in his reward for the learning,
Right.
because she was in the thing of the jewelry
Right.
business.
And she was a
This is
very
very-
strong woman. The rabbi, they say, was afraid of her in Tzvat. So, and she made the shidduch from Meir Sharam to my grandfather.
And
She was the one.
you know more than I do
I-
about the grandfather.
Well, I know.
Well, the grandfather's name was
Alter Chaim Mordechai David Rosenman.
Rosenman was the last name.
Right.
And they moved. When they came, according to Tzvi, came to Israel in the 1840s.
Four, I think.
Yeah.
Well,
And they were
somewhere
straight
1840.
went straight to Yerushalayim. They were
They were in Meir
Yerushalayim.
Sharon.
His matzah factory, his grandparents' matzah factory is a landmark today in Jerusalem, a historical landmark. His name was Reb Leibish Talesnik, and
Tell them why he's Talesnik.
because he made talent.
Because they
Yeah.
they switched the Talis factory into the
Into
Matzah
the ma-
factory.
right.
So because they made Talesam.
Right,
They
right,
called him Rebbe Talesnik.
right. And my, I don't know, if just family history has it that the Shadchanit Hudus made a shidduch for my grandmother when she was 15 years old, and she happened to be passing. There was her intended on the street, and my grandmother said to her, by the way, that's your chassan, and he was 15 and a half, 16 also. And what happens at 16? You have acne. And she saw him, and she says, I'm not marrying that boy. I would refuse to marry that boy. Anyway, for the next shidduch, so they had to call it off. It was a big shanda. She was the shadchanit. They had to call off the shidduch, and the next shidduch was my grandfather. And
It was not.
And there's a funny story about it, because the next shidduch's, her intendant, his mother also heard the story. How did they get out of the first shidduch? My grandmother's mother spread a rumor that my grandmother was missing a leg.
I didn't hear
And so that's true. They spread a rumor that my grandmother was no leg, and somehow the rumor got around, so the other family broke the
broke it.
shidduch.
Oh,
So the next shidduch comes around, and that mother heard the rumor, and she said, oh my God, I have to check this out. So she took my grandmother as a young girl, 16 or 17, to the beach. 3-day trip by horse and buggy
to see
the
that.
beach to take her swimming. She had to check it out to see if my grandmother had 2 legs, which she did, and the shidduch proceeded.
That's funny.
And that is true, because I've heard that from aunts and uncles from the time I was very young. Even my grandmother told it to me.
Right.
It's not the way I told it.
But they were Stolener, Karlina Stolener Hasidim, and my grandfather was a bit of a rebel and didn't didn't toe the line at all.
He would want to be clean shaven.
Yeah.
In Meir Sharon.
Right, and he also, they shaved my grandmother's head. At the first day, after the first day after the chuppah, you get your head shaved. And he said, no, I'm not gonna, you have to grow it back. And she was happy to grow it back because she wasn't Carlina, you know. And he became ostracized in a sense, and he didn't send his kids to the right school, you know, because he was more modern. In the end, for a lot of different reasons, for economic reasons, because when the British took over from the Turks, the money was so devaluated, you know, there was nothing, you know, no parnasa, and he wanted to get away from the Turkish army, so he went with his father to America.
His brother with
His brother, I thought his father came also.
I don't know that. I know
The story I
him,
heard was that towards the end of World War I, when the Turks were desperately trying to cling to control the Ottoman Empire, they were forcing local populations into the Turkish army.
Right,
And it was not a unique story, but our grandfather, great-grandfather, sent our grandfather to America to avoid the draft.
Yes.
You also gave him a different name.
Well, he used
Right.
Saftale,
Maiden
Cooper Schmidt.
Yeah.
That wasn't her name.
Well, maybe
It
a
was.
friend's name.
No, you know
or
what it was?
something.
It was Rabbi Talesnik, our great grandfather's wife's name.
So they used he used someone else's name in the family. They didn't check it out on the internet. So he wound up in America, and I guess our grandmother was pregnant with our mother. This is why I pieced it together, because Eva was born in 1917.
She was the second child.
No, she was 2 years old when
She
he
was born in
left.
17.
No, she was already born when
She
he
was
left.
already born.
Well, but in the World War I,
Maybe she was pregnant with
1916.
Morris. Maybe she was
Yeah.
pregnant with Morris.
In any event, whatever the timeline here is, the story that I understood was that to avoid the draft, our grandfather wound up in America, and our mother, for the most part, was raised by her grandparents. Chaim Talesnik and Chaim something Moshe.
Yeah, she felt very close to them.
And to this day, she felt extremely close. When I would talk to Ima about her childhood, or I remember her going through, we had a massive amount of books in our library growing up. My father was very well read.
He was a bibliophile.
He was from day one a subscriber to Mossad Harav Kook, and he wrote contributing articles to Ma'ariv, to Panim. What other one? There was another.
Hadar.
That was the one.
So that's the environment we all sort of grew up in. Me less than you guys, because you all grew up in.
Every Shabbat we would read an article from Hadar.
So I remember Ima in the library just like reminiscing or crying. And I said, what's the matter? She was like remembering her grandfather. And she could never talk about her grandparents without getting teary-eyed. And I'd say, why? Because it was this dichotomy where he was a successful talit manufacturer and matzah factory, and yet she always used to say, but he starved to death. In the next sense, I said, well, I don't understand, how could he have starved to death and didn't have enough money to send? But there were very tough times during the Arab.
Right,
Pogroms. They did have the pogroms.
They stole from them.
Told us.
And I remember Ima telling me she was picked up from school.
From school, and Uncle Morris got the
Well, that was a
Evan thrown in
different story.
his...
That Ima was, she told me she remembered her mother putting her under her cloak.
Right.
To hide her.
Right, and she remembers running through the gates and then closing the gates.
And then,
This is when she's a child.
Yeah.
In Meir Sharon.
Meir Sharon, but she was not nearly as teary-eyed about her father as about her grandfather.
He was not involved in her childhood for
But
7
that's
years.
the point.
He was
That's
gone.
my point. Her parental
grandparents.
role models were these Hasidim in Meir Sharon.
So she stayed, and her father
Went to
went to
Right,
America.
and
For
there
7
was
years.
For
7 years.
Where was he?
In
In
America.
the Lower East
Well,
Side.
Williamsburg.
God only knows.
He went to,
I
right
know
into
where
the Great
was.
Depression.
He was in Williamsburg. Not Williamsburg. what's the other
Brownsville.
one?
Brownsville.
Brownsville.
He was in Brownsville.
That's where they moved to eventually, but we don't know where he was during those 7
That's
years.
where he
But
was.
when my
he had a store,
grandmother-
he had a shop in Brownsville.
Furrier.
a
But I
furrier.
remember Ima telling me, I mean, this is my memory.
Go ahead.
I don't remember her crying about to her grandparents' stall. I remember her telling me how miserable she was when she came to America and how she cried every day.
Right.
And how happy she was in Mea Shearim because there were apple trees.
Yes.
And that she played on the apple trees, and that she loved going to school because she didn't have to go to, she was allowed to go to school, whereas her friends didn't go to school. She went to the modern Beis Yaakov where they spoke Hebrew. All her friends had to learn Yiddish.
Where was that school?
On-
Rothschilds?
It was called Lemmel.
Yeah,
Lemmel.
so
It was a Lemmel school.
I remember
Lemmel
my
school.
mother saying,
Yeah.
who was so happy those years,
Because she
those
was-
apple trees. And her childhood ended the day they left Mea Shearim.
Well, because when she came to America, she had to really help out. My parents were immigrants.
Well, she
and
didn't speak English.
No,
They
but
put
she
her in
learned-
first grade when she was like 9, and she
They
cried
gave her a
every
different
day.
name.
Right,
First
they gave her a different name.
Ida.
The English teacher wouldn't let her use her Hebrew name. She had to be
Yes.
called
Her
Ida.
name was Chaya Esther. They called her Ida at Ellis Island. They gave her the name Ida.
But then the teacher was very empathic and asked her, do you have a middle name? And she said, yes, Esther. So she said, we'll call you Esther from now on. But when they came to America, my grandfather took his sons and cut off their payot right away, remember, to the barber.
Yeah.
And my grandmother had to take off her shadel.
Right, that's what I remember hearing.
And-
Then he made her take
And my
her, throw away her
uncle
shadel.
was so traumatized that he went to the floor, Ima told me, to pick up the peyote and he tried to stick it back on his
I don't remember
vest. Yeah, Ima told Morris and tried to do that, and Charlie, because my grandfather didn't want anything to do with that very old, you know,
Well, he had been Americanized.
history.
over the
History.
Right,
He
he
was
was
more
away for 7
acculturated,
years.
yeah. But our mother took most of the responsibility. Once she grew up and learned English, she took
Yes.
care of
She
her
was,
parents.
she was
and
the,
others.
she actually
Yeah.
made the money, made the
Yes,
money.
she was the only one that
She was a
actually went to high
typist
school.
with
The
the
brothers
JNF.
quit in 8th grade. They had to work.
Her
She
parents
went to
remained,
vocational high school. She got a vocational degree.
but they
and she
remained
went to-
immigrants their whole lives,
Yes,
Right.
they only spoke Yiddish, my grandparents.
Right,
They never
you
learned
couldn't
English.
really have a heart-to-heart, talk with them.
And you knew that your grandparents.
right? Yes.
Yes,
Yes.
very well.
Yeah.
They came every other Shabbos.
Now, my
to us.
mother was very
But they only spoke
attached.
Yiddish.
My mother was very, very solicitous of their every need, really, right?
took
She
care
took
of
care
them.
of everything for them, everything. I think she took more care of them than even us.
Us, yes, yes, I would say so.
Well, I was going to say.
Because they were always foreigners.
She worried about
Also-
Normie and Morris
and my
Charlotte.
grandfather
She
was
always
deaf.
Right, right.
Took care of them.
Well, she made them move,
Tell them
remember?
about Zadie was he was deaf.
Yes, my grandfather
Oh, he
had
was deaf.
started losing his hearing about 14 or 15. It was nerve deafness, and then he was totally deaf by the time they came over.
Yes, so when he came to America, he really
No,
couldn't
he had
manage.
one of these volume things that go up and down. Aryeh or Tzvi told me a story that he would just go like this, and
Shut
then
it off.
Safta would be yelling at him.
Yes.
He'd be lowering the volume.
Yes.
Say, I can't
My
hear.
grandmother would scream and just shut
Can't
the... Yes.
But she was lonely, Safta,
Yes.
because her siblings were all in
Yes, she
Israel.
left 7
was
or
the
8
only
siblings.
one there.
All of them remained
she
here,
was
that's why we
lonely.
had...
They had a
Yeah.
difficult, to be
Yeah.
sure, they had a very difficult life. My grandfather wasn't, from what we understand, he was a furrier, but he was not an accomplished breadwinner.
Right.
Nor a very learned person.
No, right. So he liked being in America, but our mother was very a go-getter, very industrious, and she made money. And she also had a very tough life. She was one of 3 girls. One died before she was born,
And one died
and one
after.
died after she was born.
Our mother.
So she learned the English. She was. I
She
mean,
was a
I
real
didn't know.
go-getter.
I was the youngest, so Safta Leah and Zadie. I didn't know.
No,
I knew them as
You were
old,
about-
feeble people, even
Right.
though by today's day and age they weren't that old.
right.
No.
To me, they
Right.
seemed ancient. They were in their
They
early
passed
seventies.
away.
They died at my age,
Right.
younger than I
70,
was.
71,
They
younger than
seemed
us.
ancient to me
Yeah.
at the time.
They-
But
they were-
Nima was
they were
like,
old when they were
took care of
young.
everything.
They were old when they were young.
Well, they had a hard
Right.
life, starting
They
from
really did.
Israel, the years in Palestine.
Palestine, right. On my mother's, well, my birth certificate, it says father born in Poland, mother born in Palestine. And when I look at it today, I jump. And my mother, in fact, on her passport, it always said
Palestine.
born in Palestine. And in 1967, my mother she said, I've had it with being born in Palestine after the 6-Day War. And we had a congressman in our synagogue. And she raced after him every Shabbat and said, Herbert, I don't want this on my passport. She said, Esther, you were born in Palestine. I don't care. I want you to change it. So things were okay. way before 9/11, way before what's going on today. She harassed him every Shabbat. After about a year of this, he couldn't take it anymore. He took her passport to Washington, D.C. He had it changed to Israel. She's the only one
Who was born in those years as born in Israel.
That got to change her. She wouldn't change her brother's or anyone else's, but her passport was changed, born in Israel.
Now you know why she took care of the family, took over the
Now
family.
you know the feisty Yerushalayim spirit she has.
Because I'm not coming to Israel where it's because they went 5-6 times here. I'm not going that I'm a Palestinian. I'm an Israeli. I'm not a Palestinian. But they couldn't change my birth certificate. All of our birth certificates say their mother was born in Palestine.
She was a very good daughter, I have to say that.
Yeah,
Really,
she was very good.
She took her mother and father in 1952 with us,
Yes.
4 of us.
To Israel,
Shalom
to
was
Haifa.
not born
Yeah.
on a boat trip to Israel because her mother had not seen her siblings in 35 years, and she took this boat trip with all of us and brought her to Israel so she could have a reunion with her siblings. And I
What
still
year was
remember
that?
1952.
It's over Roseanne.
And I still remember, I was only 7 years old, but I remember, of course, before security, we walked off the gangplank, or whatever you call it in those days, and I'll never forget my grandmother running to her siblings, and they to her crying, my Schwester, my Schwester. You know, it to this day brings tears to my eyes when I
Yes.
remember that scene, and my mother did it for her mother.
Wow. Yes.
And they're both, she and her husband are both buried in Har Nochot.
Right, right. That sort of goes into that her heart. Yeah, they lived in America, and both of their hearts and
They were in
souls
Israel.
Right.
were connected
Yes,
here
we
in one way.
wouldn't-
Our father was very political. I mean, I have diaries. I didn't bring them with me from the 1930s when he came to America as a 19-year-old.
So let's go to your father
Okay.
and talk about his background,
His mother.
and then we'll pick them up
Together.
together.
Unfortunately, we don't know that much about.
Well,
we
we
know
know
our
that
grandparents, but not beyond our grandparents. Really, don't know because it was Poland, you know, and our father really never talked about anything much in the
Well,
past.
once he learned about what happened in World
He
War
didn't
II,
speak about it.
he
at all.
didn't.
Well, where was he born?
He was born in Poland, and it's a
Ostrov-Mazowiecki.
town between Lublin and Białystok, and it's near Treblinka. It's
We went
20
back
minutes.
after
Yeah, we
he
went
died.
back. It's 20 minutes from Treblinka, so most of the town was taken very early on there. And we just didn't know. We really knew nothing. We knew our grandparents. They were much more Americanized,
Yeah, but
even
our
though they didn't speak
grandmother was
English.
very
Well, your
active.
grandparents came to the States.
Yeah, they all
Yes.
came together.
They all came
32.
together.
They came
My
together.
uncle got a visa, and then they finally all got out.
My
But our
mother-
grandmother was very much,
she was a businesswoman in
they were
Poland.
600 years in Poland, right? Weren't they?
They were
Didn't
many.
they travel?
They-
My grandmother was in the YIVO. She's in the book as one
Right.
of the
She-
people of
She
like-
started a kindergarten for girls and boys, which put my grandfather in Cherem for a while, because she believed that she had only one daughter and 4 sons, or 5, I don't remember.
Yeah, one
But
died.
So she wanted her daughter to have an education, so she started a kindergarten, put her daughter in with the boys. And my grandfather got a lot of flack for that, but she was a very determined woman, and she also ran a very successful silver
Crystal.
business,
Crystal.
And my grandfather, I mean, people like my grandfather, we visited the town hall, they were on the town council.
Right.
There were Jews with beards on the town council in that town.
It was very
However-
dignified. It wasn't like a Meir Sharem type beard. It was like, I can't explain it, but much more
Very
elegant.
well kept.
We actually have
refined.
pictures of all this stuff
Yeah.
because our father was so Zionistic that there were a bunch of circumstances, I think, that had them leave Poland.
Well, he went to the camps, the summer
they-
camps of, he knew about Jabotinsky
Right,
and
he was
Sagan. and-
very,
No,
first
he
of all,
belonged to
they-
Beitar,
yeah.
to Beitar, and he was very.
He belonged.
Zionistic.
Abba belonged to everything.
Yeah.
I
No,
have
but
I have photographs of him
His
with
uniforms.
Hashomer Tzair, without a kippah and with a ma'akel, as if they're soldiers. I have ones. You know, he was one of the first vice presidents of Mizrahi.
Hapoel Mizrahi.
Hapoel Mizrahi.
Hapoel
So we
Mizrahi,
were,
yeah.
when we grew up, Abba was a religious man. But I think in his youth, and his parents were religious, but he managed to.
He was modern. He was very modern.
For Poland. They weren't typical. He was a modern Zionist.
But there was because once he was
No beard.
No, but there was a community like that.
He belonged to this Tarbut school.
Tarbut, right.
There was a series of Tarbut schools that people don't know about. And the way I explained to my understanding of it is,
like a Hebrew day school.
11% of Poland was Jewish, right? So that's and maybe less than 10% of those were Zionim. And of the Zionim, maybe less than 10% of those were religious. So if you do the numbers, those 40,000 modern religious Zionists in Poland, I mean, it's really not that big a number.
No, but he belonged to a group. The most important factor
And then a
to
lot of
him
them got
was
wiped out, too.
right. But he was in a modern Orthodox, like I guess you would say, like we grew up. That's why he liked the five towns.
Yes.
But Beitar, I think, was the group that brought
Jabotinsky.
Jabotinsky
loved Jabotinsky.
and Stern, Abraham Stern, whoever came their way from the revisionist groups. My father was always at their lectures and meetings.
Right.
And he dreamed of living in Israel.
He also was a prolific writer in Hebrew, and he was.
We should tell him when he 1913.
He was born in 13.
Yeah.
He was
Wanted to
a
make Aliyah.
follower of
And
Jabotinsky's
Begin.
philosophy.
Right.
And we have Aryeh as a postcard. One of it says Poe, 1932. It's dated, and he used to write in like Roman numerals in calligraphy on it. It says in Hebrew. It said Bialik was here today.
Oh, that's what I was going to talk about. When he was in
He learned-
Tachkemoni studying
In
Bialik
Warsaw.
in Warsaw, Bialik came and gave the boys a whole lecture how from here on in they should not be speaking Yiddish, and of course Polish they didn't want to speak, and that they should only speak Hebrew. And the boys followed him.
He idolized
and from that day on, he only tried to speak Hebrew, and he really,
He
you know.
wrote-
Part of his writing.
I would show you diaries I've digitized them and given to all my siblings. It's he came to America in 1932. So I have some writings from 32 pages, but I have basically 3 diaries from 1934, 35, and 37. And you can see the progression from 34, when he was 21 years old, and he went from being a peddler to being a store on Suffolk Street and the Lower East Side. He hated it. He felt like trapped. He was a born extrovert. And he said at some point, there's got to be in Hebrew. It's all in Hebrew, his diaries. Not Yiddish, not English, but all Hebrew. He said, there's got to be something more to life than having a makolet on Fifth Avenue in Borough Park. That was one line he had. And it's very touching and moving about the life of a young immigrant who was miserable in America.
Because he was an academician. He wanted to
Right.
study
He felt it
and
was
be a
lo
professor.
photo.
It wasn't
The
intellectual
more
enough.
successful he became, the more he
Right.
spit on materialism.
He didn't suffer fools on that. He really didn't. He was a very down-to-earth. He's everybody's friend. We used to joke around that he collected Rabbanim. He had nothing but admiration for people who knew. And if you felt that you were
Intelligent.
if you felt
Genuine.
you weren't intelligent,
Yes.
you had nothing but contempt.
Right, no, but if you were intelligent, and if you were, I meant if you were
Our
intelligent.
teachers were petrified of him. My teacher would send a note home, you know, they had the mimeograph sheet in Hebrew with a few mistakes.
He would
My
send it
father
back.
would send it back, correct them, write a Hebrew poem making fun of the teacher, and then saying, do me a favor, before you send a note home, let Tamar check it. Because
Oh, really? She
she'll know.
wrote that? That's very funny. Well, he got an invitation from Yeshivat Chaim Berlin. I had this in another publication, this story, and I have the note, his commentary. From Chaim Berlin, it was, the invitation was in Yiddish, not in Hebrew, and Yiddish and English, no Hebrew. And the only time he ever spoke Yiddish was to his parents. To us, it was Hebrew or English. He didn't want us to know Yiddish.
No, he didn't want
No.
So,
It was like the masculine.
but he wrote a note, and I have this, one of the few Yiddish things I've seen him write. He wrote to the Rebbeim in Chaim Berlin.
I don't know this story.
I'll show it to you. It's really funny. It says, "What is with you?" Not one word of Hebrew in this entire invitation. He says, "Rabotai It says, "Ubnei Yisrael lo shinu et lashonu." And he wrote it to the rabbis, and he writes 3 big question marks, and he mailed it right back to them.
And did he go to the dinner?
No.
No, he wouldn't go to it.
But my father also had eclectic svarim in the house and commentaries, and he had one Kasuto, which was considered like a very modern commentary on the Tanakh. And I remember he used to give it to me when I was studying and to look up some things and interesting answers, and I did. And in Halivni, the school that we went to was not exactly in that mindset. So when I had a test in Navi, Rabbi Dubin, I answered it according to Kasuto. Well, he took off 5 points from me and said, "This is not acceptable, Kasuto." So my father came to school. And he said, "I want you to put those 5 points back on my daughter's test." Really, I remember this so clearly. He said, "Kasuto knows what he's talking about, and you're to accept his interpretation, because it's just as important as the others." And he had to give me the 5 points back.
Oh, yes. There was Rabbi Dubin.
He was a very modern thinker, very open-minded that way.
Well,
Was he educated? Did he?
Yes.
Yes.
He
Through
was
19
brilliant.
years old, he was educated in Tachkamoni school,
He taught morning
Salvation.
school, but then he didn't pursue anything more academic. You were
Well,
saying
he could.
he wanted to
He
get
came.
into Yeshiva University. His dream was to be a rabbi. But Yeshiva University, they tested him and they said he's brilliant, he can go in, and he got accepted, but they wouldn't give him they gave him a full scholarship for the learning, but they wouldn't give him money for the
For dorm.
pneumonia.
No.
And he couldn't afford, going back to Latz Liot, the peddler, which made him very depressed, because
Except-
he wanted to use his mind and he wanted to learn Torah, and here he had to sell stuff.
Except at the Reitz dinner for Yeshiva
I was
University.
there, that's how I knew the story, I didn't know it before.
Yeah, he made a speech, he was honored by Reitz.
He then
years
became a
later.
millionaire.
Yeah.
And then, so he
did
said,
want
his
that.
opening line was, "I have to thank Yeshiva University for not accepting me that many years
So I can
ago,
get this award."
So I can
So I could
contribute
money, so I can
So he
contribute.
became a
Yeshiva.
successful businessman instead of a rabbi. But he did it in such a way, my father liked to give a little stuff, in a nice way, so.
Passive
He
aggressive.
got his nekama, back. But he was self-educated. He always
Right.
read
He
and
never let us
studied.
know that he was successful financially, I have to tell you
Yeah,
that.
we never knew.
We never
We
knew
grew up
that.
very.
Now listen, we grew up, there were times when he had a lot of money and times we lost a lot
Yeah,
of
but
money.
we never
We
knew
never
He
that
made
he-
him
never
lost
knew the
money,
difference.
but what he cared about was
that we should study
Hebrew.
Hebrew.
And
Right.
he used to say to me, and we grew up in an affluent, at least in
But we didn't
later
know we were
part of
affluent, I
our-
promise you.
Yeah, well, you were
I
younger.
never-
I grew up in the
Younger
five
generation.
towns.
You
You
were
were not born in
born
Brooklyn. We
Right, we were born in
Listen, we grew up in the 5 towns at
We-
a time when my
appreciate
father
every nickel.
sold his company to a big public company for stock. He wasn't a sophisticated, he wasn't a university educated businessman, but he had great natural instincts. He sold his company, made a lot of money, but he sold it for stock, and he watched the stock go from whatever, $19 a share to $1. Okay,
it
so he
dissipated.
became very depressed later in life too,
Right.
because then he did it all over again. He built a
Started
new
another
business,
business.
and then he died suddenly. But on the way, he made 4 weddings in the Waldorf.
Right.
Okay, and nobody in the 5 towns has ever done 4 weddings in the Waldorf. All my sisters got married.
And to his credit, we grew up in the 5 towns, but we had no idea that
Right.
it was such a
Yeah.
affluent place. We had no concept at all of
Right,
it,
nothing.
and
He refused
didn't
to buy.
value, right? Am I
He refused
right?
to buy a Cadillac. And
No, he used to
buy
say
the-
to me, "I'll buy anything you want, but I won't buy a fancy car, but I'll
Right.
buy as much education as you
Yes.
want."
Right,
That's his-
education. Right.
Nothing,
Unbelievable.
no foreign cars, only Buicks and Oldsmobiles, and that's it.
But then later he bought town cars.
But
Remember?
because when
not,
he
not
saw,
when I was around.
now I have to say, when I got married, and he saw my in-law's car, not him, Ima saw what was it called? The Lincoln.
Lincoln,
Lincoln.
Continental,
And
right?
she
Remember the
says to
Continental?
Nahum, the kids are out of the house. Let me have what I want. Let me have that nice
Yeah,
car.
he
So
did
she
have a
got
Continental.
the Lincoln.
Right.
You know what the irony was? Because he, from his writings, you could see it, he grew up in a middle-class home. His parents had a retail store. He used to go to Warsaw to buy porcelain. In the census from the 1930s, it's actually listed in the Jewish genealogy that his parents owned a porcelain and something shop.
Silver, it was silver.
We heard silver all the time.
I
It doesn't
heard
say it. in
crystal.
it.
I heard crystal.
Maybe porcelain.
But it's in the town. We
But he
saw
would be
town.
the buyer. Abba would go to Warsaw when he was 13, 14,
right.
15 and go and buy
because he
expeditions
already
and
was a
bring
businessman.
goods. Yeah.
No, but it said it, and remember we saw in Poland, they had a listing of all the stores in Poland, and Savta Chaitra was listed
Yes.
on
They
it,
own
Yes.
two
silver
stores, I
and
think.
crystal.
Yes.
So they own two
Yes.
stores.
And it's still there, it's
Yeah.
still listed.
Yes.
And he was, right, I think he was very closed mouth about a lot of things after the war, because I think so many of his relatives
And
died.
friends.
And
Yes.
friends died. And I do
Father
think he had survivor's guilt, that he got to America and he had
Right.
a good life, and most of his
But he-
relatives perished.
But he quietly brought some people over.
Yes, he
Yes.
gave them visas.
Affidavits
yeah.
and visas, and helped them set up little grocery stores.
How about
to-
the
He
real
marched
story?
on Washington
Yes,
at
but
the
what
end of
about
45.
the
know,
hiding of the
Roosevelt.
arms in
Oh,
1947?
this is a
Right.
great story.
Shalom, you should tell that.
Right, you have to tell this.
Look, all I could tell you is what I heard.
Right.
Yes.
There was a guy who's died. You probably know the name Arthur Schick.
Yes.
Yes.
He's done Schick's Bakery.
Bakery.
In Brooklyn's a famous. And I was paying a shiva call to Silver.
Joseph.
Joe Silver
Right.
died.
Right.
His brother was.
Let's not talk about his brother.
I'll talk about his brother. His
Not in
brother was the
public
famous,
meetings.
infamous. Anyways, Sheldon
no,
Silver. Okay, so Sheldon Sheldon's brother Joe's aunt was a very close.
Pepe.
Pepe, Feller, was very close to our family. So we have this
But I heard
Twine.
before that, Shalom. I knew about it before.
Okay, well, you want to tell the story?
No, you tell what you heard.
Anyway, so I was just sitting at the shiva call talking to Sheldon Silver and da-da-da, and then this big guy sitting next to me, Arthur Schick, and we was talking about Brooklyn. I said my parents were from Brooklyn originally, my siblings were born in Brooklyn, and he said, "What's your name?" I said, "Maidenbaum." He goes, "Oh, I know. Who's Nat Maidenbaum to you?" Because I'm the youngest, but he was gone already,
Father died
by
at
25, 30. He
yeah.
died young, my father, at 65. And he says, "Oh, your father, yeah, he was very involved with the Haganah," he said, even though he was much more of a revisionist. He says he had a wholesale food operation called Met Food. And he said, "We used to use his warehouse to hide guns for the Haganah."
Right.
I said, "Really?" And he never said a word. In his lifetime, he never said a word to me or to any of us. But it fits.
Right.
If you knew our dad...
47. It was 47.
47.
Right.
It's something he would have done.
He also,
And the total, to me, a total stranger, I mean... he
Told you the
told
story.
me
Yeah.
the story.
And Arthur Schick was involved in that also?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
He's gone, but he says, "Oh yeah,
Because they
we
were very friendly.
used to use the Met Food warehouse to
Yes.
hide
There was
guns.
people
for
who hid
Haganah."
it in their basements in
Right.
Brooklyn. But
Yeah.
Abba had more room because of the warehouse in Brooklyn.
Yeah.
Yes. Oh, that I had heard
Yeah, I heard
years
that.
before, right? We
Yeah.
knew it. Tamar and I
heard
knew it.
But they
He
were very
was-
close
he was
now.
a
he
very-
always also had to our home.
But it was a little bit illegal, so that's why
Yeah,
it
but I
wasn't
don't
exactly
know
public.
if Shalom, you were very young, maybe you remember, but he used to have for Shabbat meals, Eldad, remember?
Yes.
Who was part of the
Israel
Levy.
Eldad,
Israel
right.
Eldad, who used to regale us with stories of prison. He was in prison by the British, he was part of
Listen,
the...
through our house,
Oh,
we had people
yeah.
like Mayor Kahana.
Also, that
We had-
famous...
Uri
Street Greenberg.
But we didn't know an American nursery rhyme. I never heard of Mary Had a Little Lamb.
Right.
Well, they
We
did
know
that,
the
Rachel.
Katan stories,
They
right?
did it for a reason,
They did it for a
because they were
reason.
going to make Aliyah.
Yeah,
so
we
they
had that
because
very
we-
famous book, Gan Gani.
Gan Gani,
Yes,
the yellow
yes.
book.
But the
the
most
yellow book.
important thing was we didn't belong in America.
Right.
So that was
We didn't even
part of
belong in
our
Lawrence.
very, well, we didn't belong in Brooklyn, but we didn't belong in America. We were people that had a country, but it wasn't the one we were living in. So it was always a temporary place.
They had very
We were-
mixed feelings.
So
about
we
that.
were
we
always-
try to make Aliyah. I think
3 times.
Yeah.
at least 3 times
At
they
least.
would not officially make Aliyah, but at least 3 times they made major excursions to Israel and then
But this was a
around
temporary
and came back.
stopover where we lived.
But they thought it
And
would be
that was
temporary.
part of our very being. Okay, whatever we're going to do, whichever school we went to, whichever friends we were going to have, okay, make the friends, keep the friends, have the friends, but you know we don't really belong here.
Right.
Our home is Israel.
Always, he says.
Since our birth. So it kind of was a little bit of a seesaw, good and bad, because while we wanted to know that we belonged where we were, and we were very much part of any community we lived in, my parents were very active. My mother, where's Ima? She's at a Poland Mizrahi meeting.
She was the
Where's-
first national president
Of Amunah women.
Of Amunah.
Yes,
Then it was
so-
called Tapal Mizrahi.
And my mother had 6 children. She was always out and doing
I have
for
a
her family?
thing called Ziona Women.
Yes,
Right.
Yes.
We raised $300 for Israel. You know, it's
Oh,
like
how about the story of
The
Golda
story-
Meir?
Yeah, when I was sitting Shiva in Israel for my mother, and somebody came over and told me this story because my mother.
Arya told us at her funeral.
Yeah.
I think.
No. He didn't know it till
We knew before.
Weinberg came over.
No, I think we knew before. Well, it doesn't matter. Tell us.
whatever.
So she says, you don't know that my mother was president of Hapoel Mizrahi for a long while, and when Golda Meir came
To raise money.
to raise
56.
money.
I think that was through
No,
Amuna,
I thought
though.
it was it.
No, it was
we
the
were-
40s, so-
We were in
No, it was
Brooklyn
the
then.
50s.
Yeah, I think it was through Amuna women that she brought her over.
I don't even
So probably
remember.
have
But
6
anyway,
siblings.
my mother, when she met Golda Meir, and and of course she spoke a fluent Hebrew, so Golda spoke a fluent
Well,
English.
they
So-
brought her over to raise money.
Right,
for Israel.
right.
The story I understand
So-
was in the Sinai campaign in the 50s
Oh, maybe,
that she
yeah.
was sent to America
To
to
raise
raise
money.
desperate for
Raise money, right.
funds.
So my
So
mother,
she was a member of the
being who she is, I mean, she
not very
loves
tact-
she
very
loves
outspoken,
Zion.
not very
She
tactful.
says to Golda, "You can't lecture dressed like you are."
I'm taking you to Macy's. And
No,
getting
not Macy's. She
nowhere.
took her to an exclusive
On 13th
Borough
Avenue?
Park
13th
store. I
Avenue.
forgot what it was called.
I wouldn't know the name.
And they weren't making a lot of money then. And the woman who told me this says, and your mother paid out of her own money and didn't ask for it back. She bought her 2 outfits.
I think in a bra. She looked like Golda's bra. Stockings, shoes,
That gold is
and a
out.
dress.
And she says,
My mother was very
"This is
obsessed with
America,
undergarments.
You can't dress like that."
She said she looked like she was wearing a
I
house
assume you
dress.
do some editing here.
But my mother said, you won't raise any money in that dress.
Right.
So-
I
mother
thought that
wasn't
Aryeh
so-
told that at her funeral.
And my mother
Maybe
wasn't
not.
exactly,
But it's a great story
no,
because
but
she
you
knew
weren't
she was
at
out
the
to raise
funeral in
money.
America.
And she said, you're not going to
No.
get to
Right.
this crowd
So
of
now what Aryeh heard about
well-off
it in
people
Israel.
Oh, later?
and
Oh,
raise
that's
money.
what told us.
Yeah, Weinberger,
Yeah.
right? Gerald.
If she would.
No, because she was also part of that group. His mother.
Right,
His mother.
right.
They were a
So-
very tight-knit group for Israel. She brought a lot of women together, very focused on Israel, very Tzioni. As a matter of fact, one of the wars, maybe it was in 48 even, maybe it was maybe
Well, I
later.
don't remember. I
that
was
story? No.
6 months
No, it
old.
must have been a little bit later. Israel was in emergency.
Must have been 56.
Maybe 56. No, but we already lived in Lawrence.
We didn't.
They
move
just
to
moved in
Lawrence till
56.
So we just moved.
We lived in Borough Park. They had a meeting, and a lot their friends came downstairs, and they said we have to raise money for Israel. It's an emergency. And one of their friends, the Kramers, Harold and
I
Lucy
remember.
Kramer, got up. They were both teachers, and they said, "Listen, we just saved money to buy a car, but we're going to give the money to Israel." And that started the trend that they all gave money. That's how committed they all were as friends to Israel from early on. I just don't know what year that was. But my mother told me that story several times.
How did they meet, your parents?
Oh.
I have a good story.
tell.
I tell stories. Actually, it's something we used to hear around the the Shabbos table. My father used to say, we met at a Shomer Tzair meeting. If you knew my father, it would be like the last place you'd ever find him, is at a Shomer Tzair meeting. But then I found his diaries well after he died, and I'll show you 2 pages. I showed it to a lot of people. I could practically know by heart. And he describes an entry in his diary how on a Friday night he was supposed to meet his friends, including Yitzchak Feller and some girls from their sneef or whatever.
Yeah.
They already had. He actually started the first Chug Ivri in America,
Yeah.
really, and they had a convention in Philadelphia. Partly in his diary, and this was like in '37. Like the first diaries, he was depressed. By '37,
Because he got active in
he
something
was in
meaningful.
America, and he grabbed onto this idea of having a Chug Ivri in America. And among his friends was a guy named Persky, which was Peres's cousin, brother,
Related to
uncle.
Lauren Bacall family too.
Well, it was
Yes.
more like Shimon Peres's family.
Also he was related.
Okay, so they started this Chug Ivri in Philadelphia. They had a convention of like the tri-state area, and he wrote a lot about it. And he says Philadelphia will be remembered for two things: where they signed the Declaration of Independence and where the first chug in America. He has that in his diary. It's very funny. He was very funny like that. And then in the same diary that year, I think he met our mother. He might have met her once before, but he describes this thing on a Friday night. They were going to debate a Vikuche Dat or whatever in the Engelsville Bar Park in 1937. But all in Hebrew, very colorful, beautiful Hebrew. He said that it looked like it was going to rain, and nobody showed up. He said, Choser Kahal mit Yorim HaGeshem, he wrote. So they looked for another place to go. And they went to something called Ulam Poalei Tzion, which is the antithesis of the Engelsville Borough. But they knew there was some activity about Israel back in the day. I mean, we have things that say Palestinian dance night. You know, that my parents went to. Very interesting memorabilia.
Send it to Gaza.
Yeah. So he goes on to describe. We went to this place, and he says and all in Hebrew. He goes, how horrible I felt when I walked in and I see the Yoshev Rosh, Mashen Cigaretta, he goes. And he goes from the Mizrach, in quotes, like with Aaron Kodesh should be the guy standing on the podium smoking the cigarette. And he goes, and just last year he was part of Yisrael Hatzair, and he was part of our group, and how did he get to be this? And he says, on either side of this guy, very descriptive, are two flags, red as blood, he wrote. Communist. And there was a picture of Karl Marx, Norman Thomas, who was a labor organizer, and he writes Gewalt, Ezetar Rovet, he writes in his diary, and goes on. He says, Lo yacholti lirkod et ha'or mipnei, because heika al nafshi v'heimera et libi. He wrote.
Bittered his heart.
That's how he described that whole experience there. And then you go to the end of the entry in the diary, and he says, and then I saw that girl. That's right. Bata Yerushalayim, he called our mother. He said, Bata Yerushalayim Esther. So he must have known about her from somewhere before. And instead of explaining why he was there, in his diary, this is so Abba, he writes, he hit stika at Datzma, like she had to give an excuse of why she was there. He hit stika as like en malasot el shishi, and the last line squeeze in says kedai lasot mashu binyan zeh, and next year he married her.
Yeah.
And he used to say, I met her at a Shomer Tzayir meeting. I never understood the whole context.
Just for the rainstorm.
Yeah, but the story is that he heard her sing Hatikva Behavara Sfaradit, the Lo Behavara Ashkenazi.
Like an Israeli,
right.
she sang.
And since he knew that meant she spoke Hebrew, and he was more comfortable in Hebrew, than English, then he just whizzed over. Yeah, he
heard her sing in Hebrew.
And he started speaking Hebrew to her, and she started answering in Hebrew. So
I like that last sentence. Kedai.
I read that. You sent that in the diary. I read that. That was very
There's a
interesting.
lot of stuff in that diary that's very interesting. He discusses Jabotinsky's philosophies. He discusses raising money for Youngersville Borough Park. There's something about he captured history through the writings of a 21, 22, and 24-year-old, which is really unique.
But our education, our teachers did not teach us about the Eitzel and the Lachi and Began. We knew it. We knew it from our hands and say it. They say, shh.
Yeah, we knew it from the house.
Teachers didn't know half the time.
If they knew, they weren't telling us.
We got a great education.
Listen, through our house, like Eldad you mentioned, Mayor Kahana,
Uri
Tzvi Greenberg was a personal friend. It wasn't just a friend; he was like his Superman.
He was an
he
aide on
idolized
Tuba.
poets.
Our father, right, he really admired
Greenberg was an
them.
aide on your
Mike
tuba?
Tuba.
And he was. I have a picture of Ima, Abba, and him and his wife at Niagara Falls. He paid for him to come to.
Right, he revered them. He really revered anybody that
was our parents were
intellectually
very
gifted.
interesting people. And we talk about growing up in Lawrence. I always felt it took me a long time to get comfortable in my own skin in Lawrence because of mainly, even the Orthodox Jews, there weren't a lot.
They were
Right, there were
kind
mainly-
of watched
There were none. There were like 5 families.
You know,
Even out of them, how many of them spoke Hebrew in the house?
there were a core of Orthodox Jews in the
When
five
we moved out,
towns.
very few.
But there were
Five
core,
and
like
six.
Manfred Lehman,
Right.
and the few people
K.
making a
Kestenbaum.
minion. And what you guys were saying about Abba wanting to live. Why do you want to live in the 5 towns? It was not exactly
Well, he wanted to
Borough
move
Park, and
back.
it wasn't exactly Poland,
Right.
but he wanted to capture this childhood of
Right.
his.
Yeah.
That's what
that
we
was
said.
middle class. His
Living in the
mother.
country.
But it was also similar to his town.
Yes.
Remember
Yeah,
the
well,
town
if you
he
look at
came
the
from?
Sefer
Trees,
HaZikaron
parks
for-
and
Trees.
trees.
If you look
Oh,
for
you
Sefer HaZikaron for Ostrov Mazavia, you have Savta Chaycha as on the council
Right, of women. She's on the
She was
sisterhood
like the
of the
equivalent
women.
of the PTA over there. So I think he liked the
sisterhood.
whole
But
idea
You know what he
of
did
how
also? I don't know if you
being that
you remember. He bought the house.
photo. B'nai Akiva, something like
And
that?
yes,
Right.
They
to make
dropped,
rice.
He bought
one of his
another
biggest
house
disappointments,
to make a B'nai
1977.
Akiva center.
He was so involved with Chaz and Ehrlich. Remember Cantor Ehrlich?
He's-
He was his best
Oh
friend.
yes, he started that together.
So-
They started, like you said, he started that chug. He started something Friday nights in Lawrence of learning.
Yes.
That was also a thing that he began. Remember with the
I
Earl?
remember it very
Yes.
He was, he was shouted down. That was your generation, not mine, right?
well. Look,
So-
I do know, we were skipping
He
around.
got into big trouble for
Marcella
that
was
B'nai
Washington
Akiva
Avenue.
house.
The
Oh,
B'nai
right.
Akiva home,
I don't remember.
it was Cantor Ehrlich's idea, they wanted to have a B'nai Akiva in the
House.
5 towns. But this is 1977. By that time, there were a lot of established Orthodox shuls on all sides of Lawrence. So innocently, he thought that he put down the down payment for the house, and he would have a place for B'nai Akiva. Well, within as soon as
Didn't go over.
they found out in Village Hall or whatever, he got instant pushback. We'll never give him a variance. We'll never do that. He has, I won't mention names, but he wrote one of the letters in this is a stinging rebuke to the president of the White Shul, that how dare he not embrace an idea of a
It
B'nai
was too
Akiva.
Israel. It was too.
I think the shuls
they-
were threatened.
They
White
all
Shul
felt, they
wasn't
felt
too-
threatened that their own youth programs, they
And
just
also the
didn't
White
get
Shul
it.
The
wasn't
White
so
Shul, the White Shul was so right
They
wing.
were, well, back in the 70s, it was different.
It was different, but still, they had their own.
But he was
narrative.
so he was so idealistic.
You know?
He was so creative with so many ideas. He was really
Ahead of his
heartbroken.
time.
No, but yeah, he was ahead of his time all the time. But he was heartbroken by that getting that kind of pushback.
But he was trying to duplicate his town in a more positive way, because when we went there, we saw that there a lot of similarities. They were
I have a
different.
picture
It was
of
very
him-
eclectic. His
I have a
town.
picture of him as a counselor in the
In
Tarbut school had a
Poland?
summer program. So he was
I
a counselor
never
when he was
saw
like 17, 18. He was wearing a suit.
The suit?
A suit with
Not
your
like
bicycle.
shorts and a...
You know, like a nice shirt and,
I think they were
nothing what you
always-
think a counselor
Right.
would be wearing.
But they were very well dressed. My grandmother was
Yeah.
very into, everybody looking well and being well dressed. And my aunt Norma, told me that they lived very, very, very well.
they
And
did not
every
say
time
anything.
someone got a good grade, my grandmother would throw a kiddush. She was very into.
She said they had like
including,
monthly
parties.
kiddushes, like Rosh Chodesh kiddushes.
They
for
all
the
lived in
yeshiva
one big
kids.
complex there
It's like a
somewhere.
garden apartment. We went back to the town. They were horrific, the Polish.
But
They
the
locked
interesting thing
doors.
is,
They
though,
let us go into where my
they
grandfather
didn't flee Poland.
No.
They left Poland.
They
Well, they
left
left
Poland.
because of the army again.
No.
Again, the army took
No,
them.
no.
Yes, Savta
No.
didn't want the boys to
No,
go to the
but you-
Polish
No,
army.
Savta
well,
told
that
me the
made-
story.
the-
Savta Chaycha told me
Her
the story.
brother,
Her brother,
the
Uncle
Rabbi
Gray.
Louis Gray, or
Yeah.
whatever.
He told her to leave. He
Yeah,
said,
he was in
"Get
America.
out."
He set up. He was a rabbi. There was economic opportunity. Yet, and you were waiting when they had the interview. Savta had curses at the
But,
Polacks.
no, she told me she left because her brother said to her,
But they weren't.
"No, there's a crazy man on the coming." That's what her brother
Really?
told her. Yes, and she said to me, I didn't really believe that, but I hated the Polacks. They was taking taxes and more taxes off my business. Before I would even know it, I would have no business. She said, and I hated them. They were anti-Semitic. So my brother was a Talmid Chacham. She said, like your father. He was like my Nachamon, like your father, brilliant. So she said, I listened to my brother.
Which
That's why
way
she
was
left.
this?
One of the Uncle
brothers.
They
Grays.
were originally
They were
Gray
all
Upskis,
Uncle Gray.
and they became Grays in
Was
America.
that Harriet's
No, no,
mother's
no, no,
father?
no, 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 no.
I'm curious about the 1940s. the Holocaust, if your father ever, their awareness of what was going on. You had mentioned they didn't talk
My father
about
was
Never.
very aware.
But
He was very aware, of the Holocaust itself, but I'm talking
was-
pre-Holocaust.
okay,
So what he was very aware of, politically astute, like you wouldn't believe. If you read his diaries,
He talks about
not
it.
only did he write, but he had this obsession. I think his favorite invention of the 20th century was the Xerox machine.
Right.
Because up until then, if he wrote and
He
sent
used
somebody a
carbon
letter,
paper.
he then rewrote it for his own records. Okay, he was obsessed with
Yes.
With the
I have
copies,
so
with
many
copies.
documents that he wrote. On top of it, it says tofes. It doesn't
Copy.
say hetek, it says tofes.
Copy.
That's the word he used for copy. And I have in the back for Harry, on the back of an envelope, I have it in here on the phone. You're talking about Hitler, right?
He knew
So
about it already.
he writes a letter to his brother that ostensibly was instructions from the mother. Our uncle got a visa, left, went to Mikveh Yisrael. Have documents that show our father was instrumental in getting him in and guaranteeing his tuition, which was like £12 sterling or something for the year in Mikveh. But then our uncle left, went back to Poland, and he fell in love, I guess, or was going to marry.
His first cousin.
Was going to marry Ruth.
Ruth is
Yes.
And then his first cousin, right? So he evidently was lingering there after our father, our grandmother, and other uncles already had visas to America because they couldn't get visas. They didn't have work. That's what it was. So Jack wound up in Israel because they had a work
Now
permit,
also to get
study
away from the
permit.
Polish army.
And
too.
Abba and all them couldn't get into,
Israel.
and coupled with the fact that Safta's brother encouraged them to come to
America.
America, they wound up in America, although Abba's, I think his thought his whole life was,
Was to
how
go
am I
to-
going to get back,
back.
make Aliyah?
But she did have to bribe some guards, some of them in
She
the
said
visa
they-
department.
I
She told me
don't know about that.
she told me she gave her jewelry to get Aunt Norma out. They told her that you can't take her out. She has a heart murmur.
I didn't hear
That's
that.
what she
So-
told
So what
me.
happened with Jack?
I know I have a picture of the
Right.
four of them on a street in Warsaw.
Yeah, it's such a good
And
picture.
it's a good picture.
Yeah.
And on the back, he used to write on the back. He liked documenting things. On the back of it, it says, Hayom Harat Haviza.
Right. He was very
In
clever.
1932.
Play
It's
on
like Hayom
words.
Harat Hadin or something.
Yes.
Hayom Harat Haviza. So I didn't
No,
know.
but yeah,
that-
my aunt, Savta Chayja told me that Norma was 9 years old, the baby. She took her to get a visa, and she couldn't get a visa. They said she has a heart murmur, and they're not letting her out. So my grandmother said to me like this. She used to go, I went and got my jewelry. She said, and the next time I slipped my jewelry to the guard there, and Aunt Norma got a visa. She said, so I tell you this, always keep jewelry in the vault. She said, always keep jewelry.
She was very funny. At Dassi's wedding, they had interviews, right?
They didn't have
Wasn't
videos.
They
They
had,
videos.
whatever it was, for some reason on a record.
It was over
And
50
they
years
ended-
ago, so.
Yeah,
you
and
know.
they interviewed our grandmother, and she, by that time, she wasn't understanding everything clearly.
Well, she didn't understand English that well either.
Right.
Yeah, so what they say, she says, how was it in Poland? What was it like? Were they nice? She goes, no, you machshman, the Polakim took everything. She was like bitter.
Bitter, right,
But
she hated them.
on the other hand, they made this conscious choice to leave. They
Yeah,
weren't-
because of that. They
Well,
didn't
Abba
even
said he
realize.
felt anti. I had to once
Smell it. The
interview him for
dogs.
a class project, and he
Me too.
said, they looked at you on the street, and he says,
You felt
made
the-
you feel humiliated, as if something was wrong with you. He says he hated the
Well,
Polacks,
that's why
hated
we
us.
weren't allowed to have any dogs. Which
It was very fortunate that she listened to her brother.
Yes.
You know, that she
You know,
left.
you're talking about interview. When you're a little kid, sometimes you have to do an interview with your parents. It's probably the only time I ever.
But he
one of
probably
the
didn't
few
tell you the
times-
truth.
He only tells you what he wants
Right,
you to
exactly.
know.
I was
Well,
gonna
Well, I
say
didn't
that.
do much of an interview. It must have been 8.
Yeah.
But I said, Abba, why did you leave Poland? And he had a sense of humor. So he'd say, because on the holidays, or let's say on Easter, the Polakim would get, the Goyim would get drunk, and they'd throw rocks at us, and they'd say, Je, or Le Palestini, you know,
Right.
Jew go to Palestine. So I said, so what did you do when they threw rocks at you? He goes, I listened, we left. He goes,
When I asked him about Poland, he said to me, "Oh, Poland! I ate hot cereal every morning.
That's right.
That's why I have warm hands."
Right.
Right,
Like
right.
he
He
would
had very
never
warm
give you a
hands.
straight answer.
Never wore gloves.
After the war,
Mhm.
he never wanted to talk about Poland.
You know
Once
that-
he found out, but
Right.
in his writings, when he speaks about, when he writes about the war, the words burn into your brain. They're so paralyzing. It's like the Chorban. Every word, even if it doesn't say Chorban, every word is a Chorban when he writes about it. When the reality of it came in 44,
He wrote
45,
it
and he
in
learned
the,
what actually happened. So he
Zachor.
never spoke about it again.
Never.
He didn't
Never
want to
spoke
talk about his
about it.
friends.
He wrote a very
He didn't want to talk about
short
his hometown.
Oh, really? Yeah, I
Nothing.
remember that. I remember
Very
that. I forgot what he
powerful.
wrote.
He wrote in the Zachor book for Oster Mazadetch, if you read it, very short, very powerful. It starts off with Eicha. It's the first time I ever saw or heard any expression about what happened. You see that it pierced his heart, what
Yes.
happened there.
He felt like helpless, powerless, because he
Yeah.
usually got things done, and yet.
But he never showed,
Americans-
he never
Well,
showed any
there-
sign of
There was
it.
a lot of things that were going on in the States at that point, like Vahatzala and
Yes,
the
Irving Bunim.
Irving Bunim.
Yes. Yeah.
So were these names that you were?
Yeah.
We know Irving Bunim.
It was like relatives of-
Yeah.
Oh,
They also
yeah.
went to Washington D.C. They said to
Ix, I think.
Lasot Hafkara. My English
Peter
and Hebrew have
Bergson,
both gotten
Hillel
worse
Cook,
here.
These names,
Um,
Bergson, Hillel Cook.
But I remember
They didn't share it with
they
us,
said
but they
because
definitely
of
knew
that.
about it.
Yeah,
They
but
did
but
not
Ima
talk
did
about
tell
it.
me that
They went to Washington to protest?
Yeah,
Yes.
but
You might say we marched on Washington.
Yes.
Right.
yeah.
No, but my father must have had some powerful guilt feelings.
Yeah.
For
something.
sure.
Because Aryeh, our brother, I don't know if he told you this, he was recently again in Auschwitz for a tour with from the Jewish Heritage Museum. And he said there's a new wall put up there with all the names of those that died in Auschwitz. And he was so taken aback. He said there was a whole list of Maidenbaums.
And that we didn't
He
know
took
about.
a picture of it.
Yeah.
And that none of us never knew anything
Right.
about it.
Well, there's a.
Well, there was a lot of silence about that, and there was. I
And we
think he also
still-
wanted to protect
Yes.
us, and he
He
felt
didn't want to
guilty.
stir
Very
up
much
his
wanted-
feelings.
People always say Maidenbaum is an uncommon name. And when you look at the Jewish genealogy stuff, and you look at the wall in Auschwitz and in Paris,
Paris
by the way,
also.
Right.
there's a lot of Maidenbaums. They're
Right,
all
that we
wiped
know.
out.
They were wiped out. Yeah.
We didn't even know about these relatives.
I never know
The
where to
relative
look
from
for.
Paris, what
Yeah.
was the name?
Maidenbaum.
Maybe.
Benjamin Maidenbaum.
And an
Ironically,
Esther, and an
there's a
Esther.
Benjamin and Esther Maidenbaum on the column
On the wall.
in the
Also in
Paris.
Auschwitz. In
The
Auschwitz.
reason that we
Auschwitz,
found out about the
Because
French
that
one
woman
is my
died in
brother
Auschwitz,
is a
Esther.
Jungian analyst.
Yeah,
The one you saw in the
This
wall.
person from
Died in
France about
Auschwitz.
20
Well-
years ago was doing research. She found my brother's name and she wrote him a letter. And she said possibly we're related. And they connected. I think Aryeh met her, right?
There was a
No,
Maidenbaum.
I met her. I've met her
somebody-
twice already.
I met somebody whose their stepfather's name was Maidenbaum. I'm going to look it up right
Gabi?
now. And I was curious.
From here,
if it
from
was
Israel or from America?
from. They were from France.
Oh,
So
so
that's-
Shalom
that-
met them.
that's-
Oh, that's that story. Wasn't there a story where somebody
That's
died?
interesting.
That's
Yeah.
the one that
Rabbi Moses Maidenbaum.
I heard that name, but I don't think it's.
It's related.
Look,
because
I
it's
think
not
they're
simply
related. The story I know is there's somebody named Laurence Maidenbaum. She's the director
As a woman.
She's a curator of a museum of outside art. It's called Autre Art in Paris. She reached out to us, and 10 years went by, and then I reached out back to them when Iris and I went to Paris, and we met. Her daughter is going to Sorbonne, but I think she's married to a non-Jew, but she told me like a heart-wrenching story. And that's where this Benjamin and Esther Maidenbaum come in. Benjamin Maidenbaum was her grandfather, and I think he was deported from Marseille to Auschwitz, and her father, Benjamin Maidenbaum's son, was hidden by Catholics somewhere or as a little child, and he came out of the war, I guess, emotionally scarred, but he grew up. He gave birth to this Laurence Maidenbaum, and then he killed himself.
Yes, I heard that.
And she kept the name Maidenbaum even though she was married, because she's like the last.
the last of that.
So I asked her, when did they all get to France? Because in the 1920s they immigrated from Poland. So I'm sure they were
That has to
related,
be.
and they had
That has to be
similar
a
names.
connection.
And there were. The more I look up Maidenbaum and Google it because they're not a lot in America. The more I see there were in Poland and in Europe.
Also, Grajewski, my grandmother's name. My grandmother from Poland. They were in Poland many years. So, someone accosted me once, asking me if I was related to Maidenbaum. This is years ago, and you'll know the name when I tell you. And he came over to me and he said, well, my father was part of the Grajewski family. We changed it to Gray. We moved to Chicago. My father moved after the war. I don't know the many relatives. A lot of the family was killed. Turned out to be Maish Tarragan's uncle.
Oh, it's a small world.
Yeah.
What about the, like, getting into, like, the more organized, like, religious Zionism, Apollo Mizrahi, some of the religious Zionist leaders, people like, Herzog or Mayor Bar Ilan.
Yeah, oh, Bar Ilan was
was
his best
also, I guess, at our
friends.
house.
Tuvia
Yeah,
Bar
it was
Ilan.
very
Who-
friendly.
The father, also the father.
Right.
The father
We
of
had them,
Tuvia.
yeah.
But the old man, Bar Ilan.
Tuvia.
I don't remember.
Aryeh
Took
said that
Tuvia's
Tuvia
father.
Bar Ilan was a friend of Abba.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that
Tuvia's
was a good
father.
friend.
And he says that when, and our brother, older brother,
Went to
studied
Bar
Bar
Ilan.
Ilan in
We met
1960.
Tuvia.
Yeah,
We went
He's
to
the one
visit.
that let us go for half a semester.
exactly.
To
When
Bar
we wanted to
Ilan.
go to Israel.
Right.
They didn't let you go for less than a year, but Tamar and I came in January for 2 weeks, and we decided we wanted to spend a half a year, and he let us go for.
Well, they were
half
very
a
good
semester.
friends. In fact, we went to visit Bar Ilan when it was one building. That's how far back I remember Bar Ilan.
My brother went
With
there.
the elderly man, with Tuvia's father.
Yes,
Who I think the
I
school
didn't know
is named
Tuvia's
for.
father.
Mayor.
Mayor of Bar Ilan.
I knew Tuvia.
But they were originally, what's the name of that famous, they're from which family?
Berliner? No.
Yeah, something, aren't they from another family?
Bar-
They
Bar
took the
Ilan.
name Bar Ilan.
Bar Ilan is Berlin.
Yeah.
Berlin.
Chaim Berlin
No, but there's another.
and Mayor Bar Ilan.
Right.
It's the same.
Right.
Yeah,
Okay,
it was
same
another.
Yeah.
But
I have to-
Tuvia came to our house in
Yes.
America, for sure.
For
Yes.
sure, lots of
No,
times. I
their
knew his
kids
sons,
and their children
children.
also. Yeah, my father was friendly, and he knew Herzog also.
Right,
Yeah.
He knew a lot of people.
yeah.
And he
Mixed
was
with a lot of
very-
people.
Look, it's funny. Our mother grew up very modest, very poor, and our father grew up middle class. But even in his writings, he was deciding whether to go to the school in Grodno or Bialystok. I forgot which one it was. It was like a gymnasia for a year.
And-
Maybe it was the
It was Takamone.
was it Zachman?
Yeah.
Because he wound up in Warsaw though.
That's tough.
Oh, that's Takamone.
There was another one, some gymnasia, and it was one was in Grodno and one was in Bialystok, and he's writing to himself, deciding which one. He said the students and professors were very good in Grodno, he says, but the Tanaim were better in Bialystok. And he was
all
weighing,
spoiled.
and this was in the 1930s, and he was wondering,
Had air
where do I
conditioning.
go?
He ended up in Takamone.
I'm not sure, because I think there was an in-between time between.
So
then
he
he
was
was
in
like-
Tarbut then.
I think there was in between
Tarbut.
Tarbut, which was like an
And then-
elementary,
then high school.
and then he
Tarbut
had
just went through
some
high school.
some like gymnasia program, and then he went to
But,
Takamone.
right. But I remember
But-
the Gymnasia program also, he said that his father visited him in Warsaw when he was doing business. So he ended up in Warsaw at a young age. He was very
13.
proud that he was 13. And
What's
13,
interesting
he-
is if I had the rest of my life to just look at a trove of letters and stuff, some from relatives of his in Polish, some you could create an incredible life story because he documented. He never threw out things. He documented everything, and he was outspoken about everything, and he saved things.
Right.
So,
Did you show
Who was
Aryeh?
it? There was a Chaver Knesset from Gush Emunim.
right, we had Zwillenhammer
Right,
was in our
Zwillenhammer
house,
was in our
and
house.
Peleg, you know, Pinchas Peleg.
Chris Belly, sure.
He was
and,
very
and
close to Pinchas.
Joseph
But
Borg.
I was
Yosef
asking about
Borg,
Yosef
yeah.
Borg.
Yeah.
He was a good friend.
Right, Borg spoke at
From
his
Mizrahi.
funeral.
And that other
Borg
guy,
told us for all,
there was
okay.
somebody else. Remember, he was like a chubby guy. He lived in Manhattan. He was Israeli. I can't remember his name. He was very involved with Mizrahi.
Kroner?
No, Kroner
Kroner.
also, but no, it was somebody else. I can't remember his name. He was,
I can
Well,
tell you
Aryeh.
that,
He was very
that
involved.
when I
Zwillenhammer
was
was-
16, and my parents bought an apartment, they were fixing it up, and you know, in those days, to do anything, you had to wait the entire day in the apartment for the phone man to come or for something. But Abba said to me, you know, you long distance. If you left America, went to Israel, you barely ever spoke to your parents, unless you're spending $10 a minute or whatever.
Right.
So he gave me Yosef Borg's number. I was maybe 16 years old, 17. And he said, call him up and say hello. So I called him up, and he goes, I'm Shalom Maidenbaum. He says, who? Nachum Maidenbaum's son? He goes, yeah. He goes, tell him to write more checks.
The name of the guy was
He said,
Freeman.
tell him to write more checks to Mizrahi. So I told Abba, I was like, he said, you spoke to him? I said, yeah. He said, what do you say? I said, tell him to write more checks. He said that? I'm going to have to speak to him.
The person I remember was Yisrael Friedman.
Israel Friedman?
Yeah, him, and also Raphael, somebody with the last name
Yitzhak
Raphael.
Raphael?
He's on
He
my
was a Chaver Knesset.
Tana'im.
But he was connected to Mossad of Cook.
Yeah, he's my Tana'im. He's on my Tana'im.
He was
remember
a
those two
subscriber to
people.
Masada Rav Kook.
Yeah, we have so many
thousands.
books.
They took out the windows in the rooms and replaced them with bookcases because they ran out of space. And you know that, right? You know, the
Yes,
jalousie
yes.
windows,
Yeah,
they
they
all
took them
eventually
out,
became
yeah.
bookcases.
I remember when Zvulun Hammer gave a speech, and he said that Abba, everybody, he's like a magnet for all these political figures in Israel. He says, imagine you don't even live in Israel and you already have, influence with these people. Why don't you move to Israel?
You
You'll
have
become
more.
a Rosh Memshalah.
Well, he wrote to Begin. Remember, he used to write
Right.
letters.
Well, he has a poem that he wrote,
Right.
one of his
And
last
we have-
works. Actually, it's in this book.
And we
One
have
of
a
his-
letter
one of
that
his
Begin
last
wrote to
works
him, back to
Yeah.
him.
Is a poem describing, it was in honor of Yom Yerushalayim. It was written in 77, 30 years from the first time he visited Israel in 1947.
Oh, yeah, so what was the first time they came?
47.
That was on that- on
47.
when he came on that-
47.
that
No,
book.
that was the second time. They went in
47.
47.
She was in utero.
So I went
So
in
he-
47.
I was the first one to make
because he-
Aliyah.
Yeah, but he really thought they could make Aliyah. That was one
They
of the
were looking.
reasons they
Well,
were
I
looking.
also think, look, the way I piece it together, and it's like we said, they never told us stories. We just have those sort of.
Well, they left me and my brother for 6 weeks. I remember.
Look,
My
the truth is, our
grandparents.
parents were very active in a lot of things. They were busy living life. They weren't busy, if Abba lived instead of till 65, I'm convinced. If he lived till 85,
Right, he would have
and a
been.
little more,
He
more
would have
typical of an 85-year-old man, he would have been more in a retro motif and telling us about his life.
Yes.
He was really too busy doing.
No, but he
died
also
He was
doing-
very secretive.
He didn't want to
He
reveal.
didn't have the need.
A
He didn't-
moment.
He didn't
Right.
want
A
to.
moment.
But his mother was like that too. His mother, when
father-
she
No, they
when
were
she came
secretive
to-
about stuff.
But
like
when my
this.
grandmother came to America, within a couple of years, she was working for every yeshiva,
Yes.
Right.
raising money for scholarships. And she was so proud of it because she had this charm bracelet with every yeshiva on it. Look, I
She was
raised money for this
4'11".
yeshiva, for that yeshiva. She was so proud that she could send kids to yeshiva. So it was inherent in the family, this doing.
Well,
And,
in
and
the
while my
night-
father wasn't the greatest driver, he wrote poems while he drove.
Yes, that's why
You
he
should
needed
know
a new
while
car
he
every
was
year.
driving, he had a
Talking about
pad
writing on the back of
steering
an
wheel.
envelope?
On the steering wheel.
Yes, he
He would
was.
be
I remember.
writing while
I
he was
remember
driving.
going to shul on a Friday night. Must have been some simcha, and Aryeh was over, and we were like late for shul. He was going down Brooklyn like 75 miles an hour, and really
That's
very
what they
fast
drove
in the
in
30 zone. And he was not the best driver. So Aryeh was like, "Abba, slow down, because we're late for mincha." He goes, "At this rate, you're going to be late for Marv."
You're not going to make it, Tyler. You're not going to make it.
My father
But
thought
they-
the gas and the brake were the same pedal.
No,
But
I used
they-
to drive him right. Look, I'm an aggressive
Yeah,
driver.
yeah, yeah.
Because
Right.
he
Yeah.
used to have to say
Yeah.
6 or 7 stops in a day when he went back into Associated.
Right.
And he'd go in the city, and I think I'm the only kid whose father kept saying, "Drive faster, get in between them, go." And he just, from the time I was 16, I was very aggressive.
That was,
I learned-
but he was aggressive in
Ignore
every
the
way,
other
you know.
cars.
Yeah, but we must talk about in the late 40s, the early 50s. I think Abba was very instrumental in making sure all the relatives got refrigerators. I think it was in the mid 50s.
well,
Also in 40 yeah.
That's earlier than I.
No, in
because I
47
remember
yeah.
all-
Now in 47, they went to Israel
yes.
and they thought they could make Aliyah. or moved to
They were
Israel.
Meraglim.
And
They
they
were going
saw
to
how difficult it was for the relatives and how hard it was there.
It was the time of
They
the
have
Senate.
pictures of the kotel, them davening at the kotel in 47. And so he bought a refrigerator for Penina's family, and he wanted to take back to America a cousin who was part of the Lehi. His name was Michael.
He interviewed Penina.
Oh, you
he knows the whole
interviewed Penina.
story.
Yeah, so my father took the sister instead because they needed money so badly. He felt that
Well,
they'd
not
get a
instead,
job.
he bought them both tickets.
To come. Mickey-
Avram Michal Kirschenbaum
Right.
never showed up.
Right.
At
He
the
said,
bar.
"Hamakom
He
sheli
says-
po" in
yeah.
Israel. He was killed, and you spoke to Penina about it. But he wanted to make Aliyah at that time, but he said that it was impossible. So in 52,
That's
and he
when they
took
had
us
the Senna.
back.
That's when they had the Senna.
They had Senna, we had Senna, and he took a refrigerator and a couple of other large appliances, filled it with spaghetti, tuna fish, chocolate pudding. So we would, and Hershey bars, candy, and took us, do you remember this, to an orphanage, to orphanages
I was
after
five.
the Shoah,
I was
where
five,
kids
I don't
came.
remember.
But we didn't understand what it was then. He just said, "Oh, we're going to go give out candy," So I remember going with him, and we gave out Hershey bars to all these kids.
That was right after the Holocaust.
We
I know,
stayed
but I
for
didn't know
4
that.
months.
I
We
just-
stayed in Haifa for 4 months with relatives.
I didn't understand
And
that
we were
part of
supposedly
his,
going to stay.
I guess that was part of his feeling, doing something for the kids,
Right.
survivors.
Well, there were I forgot how many, 100,000 orphans
Yeah.
in Israel after the Holocaust.
And I was wondering why they get all the candy. How come
We
How
didn't know.
about 1967?
59
Oh.
became the next time though. 59.
Anyway, in
59 became
in
Toled
47,
No, but in 56 we came too. We
Let-
went to
let-
school there in 56. didn't we?
59, that's it.
Was it
59,
59 when I went to
59.
high school there?
59 became for good.
Right.
No, you think
Yes,
so?
we did.
They were-
We
Oh,
came
for a
good.
year, for a year.
No, we
Shalom
supposedly
was 9 months old.
10.
10 months old.
Yes. 10 months old.
Ten months old.
July
10 months old.
16th,
he
19.
wrote a poem on Yom Yishal, and this book we dedicated in his
But
memory.
Wait, what's that? Look, I want to get back to this. So in 59 you came.
For
in-
good, supposedly for
Supposedly.
good.
I was
Ramadan.
told, I was
Right.
All
told for a
6 of
year.
us.
I was
All
told
6
for a
of us.
year.
They bought a station wagon. I have the
Station
receipt.
wagon, how
They
about
paid
all the
$350 for
containers?
station wagon.
How about the
And they
containers?
lived like
Everybody-
kings in Israel because
We-
everyone was broke in
Yes,
Israel.
my
and
father
they had
rented a
money.
villa in Ramat Gan, 10 Talpiot Street. and
11. Tapioca.
10.
I thought it was 12.
10.
I went back
Okay,
there.
who wants to bet? Because
I do.
I have the stationery that says Talpiot 10.
Okay.
I still have the
I
stationery.
went
that
back there, by
Mars
the way.
printed.
I saw the house is still there.
neighborhood.
What?
I'm dying to go back there
Yes.
to Ramat Gan to see. I
It was
remember the
beautiful
school we
then.
went
It
to.
was so
It's not,
beautiful.
everything is
Wonderful.
different.
It's not
Tamar,
so
it
nice
was
now.
so different. It's so
So there was-
different.
so
Rachel, you wouldn't
Right.
recognize it.
I know.
But the
I know.
installata couldn't figure out how to install
The freezer
no, the washing machine.
of the washing machine.
Or
It came with a freezer, refrigerator, washing machine, dryer.
We also had two in hell, plus
And
a
our
cook.
cousins, and our cousins.
Cook. She was cooking.
my mother
And
couldn't
all
see
the
that.
relatives that would help out.
And a chauffeur. We had-
And
my
Shalom,
father would
poor
drive,
Shalom had
so we
colic.
a
He
chauffeur
screamed all
I don't
night.
hear about
Drive us around. Yecheskel.
You were the cutest baby.
Yecheskel.
Yeah, you were very cute, but you got very allergic reaction to the mosquito bites.
And milk.
Right.
I don't recall.
My mother, in short, my mother couldn't take the life in Israel. She
It
thought
was so hard.
it
My
was-
father
it
kept
was
traveling back and forth for
And
business.
she said, "This is not for me."
It was so hard. It was so
But I
hard.
will tell look, this poem that
Yes.
he wrote for Yom Yerushalayim at 77 recounts the first time he stepped foot in Israel,
Which
in
was
47. And when you were talking about it before, just think about it. When he went in 47, they had their own photographer.
Right.
They went
Right there.
really, they traveled well. And what happened to them, and how did he have the means to do that in 47?
From the
Pieced
war,
it all
he made
together.
money in the war,
He actually
during the war.
got some very good connections in World War II from a family that we're all close with in Seattle called the Ganecki family, and made some key introductions. I got trailer loads of
Tuna
Salmon.
goods.
Salmon.
When most
Tuna
of the
fish also.
tuna, salmon,
Tuna.
whatever it is, he made a lot of it. Del Monte was the first person who brought Del Monte to New York, but he made all these valuable connections and he made money. So by 1947, our mother was dying to go back. She had just heard that Nissan died, her relatives, her uncles, her grandfather, or maybe it was
I was
her
gonna grandfather,
grandfather.
'cause
Her
Nissan was still alive.
Nissan was alive, so his grandfather died. She wanted to go back, and my father had never been to Israel. So what American went to Israel in
Palestine.
1947
For 6
before
weeks.
Hakamat Medina?
For 6 weeks.
That is for 6 weeks
And they
with an
lived with 4
entourage.
children in Brooklyn with all the grandparents.
They did, no, just 2 of us, me and
I mean,
Aryeh.
you know, by
Emo's-
today's-
right, Ema was pregnant. She took me along.
Yeah. No,
by,
so my
by
bro-
today's standards, you're going into a war zone. I mean,
Yes.
the British were on the
Yes.
verge of leaving. They're,
Right, that's right. It was a
and here
transition
these,
period
these
before
Americans
the
were
war.
fairly well off, landing in the middle of it all. And he describes, basically, he berates
Read
the
it,
British.
read it,
at
read
least.
it, read it.
That's
if you
why he
like.
couldn't stay. That's why he couldn't
Here.
stay. But I'll tell you what my brother said to me. My older
Where-
brother went to the
did he have
airport
glasses?
in those years. So I still remember sitting on the bed. I was very little, and Aryeh said, "You know, they're never coming back." The sky swallowed them because he watched the plane go, and my grandparents were watching us. He said, "They're never coming back." I'll never forget that, sitting on the bed listening to him say that to me.
Was he teasing you or did he believe it?
He believed it.
Oh.
My great-grandparents were a little bit older, probably, but they were also, they were big Zionists in Cleveland, and they came in '49 also to visit.
Oh.
They came by boat. They came for 6 months.
That's-
Rabinsky was the name. And they were, but also, like, I've heard a lot of stories from my grandparents about these people who would travel through raising money, and they would go and they would be at my great-grandparents' home, and Rav Goren was close with
also.
them.
Oh, yeah,
and,
on Father.
but a lot of people, that's where they
So
would
that's why your
stop.
family became so Zionistic, right?
But they didn't make Aliyah.
No, but their children did.
No.
No.
They didn't.
I thought
You
his
did.
grandchildren, you
I'm a
did.
great,
Oh,
I'm a
you're
great.
great. Oh, but your
Oh.
parents made Aliyah.
They, you know what?
Yeah, 2
It's,
years
you
ago.
sow the
So
seed
that's
in
what
every
was-
group.
They were
And
so
you guys-
Zionistic. They were,
Right,
a big, also big Hebraist and,
Same type of,
very
same
similar.
background,
Some of the
same
things that you're talking
background.
about were very similar to what I've heard about my great-grandparents, but
Right.
they didn't,
They wanted to or just wasn't
didn't
in their
work.
they
uh,
bought a
psyche?
place, they would come and visit. My great-grandfather passed away also young in 1968. And then,
It's like our family. They wanted
You
to,
knew
but they
your
But you
didn't.
know,
Yeah.
there's
No,
a
right.
qualitative
Oh.
difference. When I went to elementary school here for a few months when I was 12, and I remember thinking, I can't deal with this. It was
I
just
hated it.
as an American who's used to a capitalistic
Right.
society,
It was
parents are
very
fairly
hard,
well off
right.
at least. The conditions in Israel were tough. You
Yeah,
couldn't.
very much different.
Today
than
it's different.
Yeah.
Today, everything's available. It's a modern society. Making out, it's still, there are difficulties, of course, but
No, it was, Israel made a lot of progress in a short period of time.
In
but
'59, there
Israel
was no
very
aluminum foil, no
informative.
plastic bags, no, I mean.
Talk about toilet paper.
look, Tamar's lived here for how many years?
Yes,
Thirty-
right,
thirty-
that's right. They
31.
She
changed.
couldn't survive here without tuna. unless
Right,
you-
I remember sending,
right.
her
My son
sons had
too.
big feet, so we used to send in the sneakers 4 cans of tuna. And
Right,
each
yeah.
How
sneaker-
about every time I came, I brought boxes for Donnie of steaks and meat
Yes,
because
yes.
he couldn't tolerate the meat here.
Yeah, but now it's good, right?
Yeah, now I.
Hi, Iris. Hi, Dassi. That's our cousin, Dassi.
Hi,
Another Dassi
Dassi.
named after her just from here. And that's a cousin, that's Shalom's wife, Iris. She lost a lot of family in the Holocaust, so she knows from which town they are and everything.
Well, we know where they're from. They're from
Yes.
Legends. We just.
why don't we
Read
read
the poem, Tamar.
Tamar, you wanna read it?
some of the
Yeah.
poem? And,
Shalom,
Yeah.
which part of the poem do you think is the best
Which
part?
one do you say when he landed his?
Why don't you read it, Shalom?
Go ahead, you guys know Hebrew.
Which lines did you want
I
us
can't
to
read
read?
Yeah,
Glasses.
which the most, I'll only read two paragraphs. Which do you think we should choose?
You know, it's interesting. My father sent me on a trip. Yeshiva University ran one trip like this behind the Iron Curtain when I was 17. Okay, I don't remember what year it was exactly, but it was still the Iron Curtain. They went to Poland and to the concentration camps. He didn't say a word about anything. He just.
What year was that?
What year was
Well,
that?
before the war.
1962. I think it was 1962. He sent me on that trip. I went with Judy Clapperman and Shirley and Florence. Remember, you were on the YU tour, but I went to Poland.
Before.
She went behind the
No,
Iron Curtain.
so I graduated 65 from high school, that's when I went.
You didn't go on the YU tour?
Yeah, from 65.
Right, so, I'm sorry, so it was 19, no, but it was in 60.
Actually, I graduated high school in '65.
No, so it was a different trip.
You went on a different trip.
I went, right, you're right. It's a
You went on
different
two
trip.
trips.
I
You
went
went one
behind the
before.
Iron Curtain.
Yeah, that was a different trip than mine.
Right,
You
Dean
went again.
Bacon,
You
know
went
Dean
again in
Bacon, remember,
65.
he was the leader of that trip. And it was interesting that Abba wanted me to go to Poland. And I said,
Because Abba did
I
not want to go.
questioned
I
it.
did not want to go.
No, I know. He said, I want you to go. I want you to go. And then I had to give a speech about it to a group of Mizrahi women, I met women at my Aunt Evelyn's house. And he was like, he came with me. It's all women, but he came to listen to the speech. He stood like behind a door to hear about my trip to Poland. But he never questioned me about what I saw.
It was too
what I
harsh for him. He
think.
didn't understand how
But
hard
it was a
till
very
we
interesting
saw it ourselves.
idea that he heard about this trip and he wanted me to go on it.
So could we read it?
He wanted me. I went in '75 to Eastern Europe, Poland, Eastern Europe, and he let me go with USY, Eastern European Pilgrimage.
Which is not so religious. Right?
It's not that it's not so religious.
It's
It's conservative. Well, and nowadays that would have never happened.
So
Because
Abba
you're
grappled
younger.
with it. I was one of two kids who were from yeshiva, though the rest, I mean, these kids barely knew Hebrew or anything and didn't keep kosher. But he was very okay with me going to Poland, even though he didn't want
He
to
didn't want to go. That's what he did with me.
Yeah.
By the way, it was 65 that I went.
Oh.
Anyway.
I was in 62 with the Mizrahi.
Here, in this, he gives a background about Jerusalem in general, and then he gives a current background of when he was there in '47, and then he gives the ultimate description how in '67 it was liberated. He could knock off a
The
poem
poem.
in no time.
And he was
But when
inspired.
sometimes he really did his research and put it together. And this particular poem is the only poem he ever wrote where he was on that was translated into English by somebody else.
Oh, I didn't know
Yeah, in fact, the English translation is
that. You know, I didn't know that it was.
It is Rabbi Pesach Tarlow.
But
He was a conservative rabbi.
Did he help him translate? Abba was in on the translation. I guess
No,
not. He didn't know
no.
English
He
that
was.
well.
He went with him on a trip to the Turo Synagogue, one of the
Right,
older
older
synagogues.
right, in
Rhode
Rhode
Island.
Island. In Rhode Island.
In Rhode Island. I don't know how Iman Abba were on this trip, but he showed him this poem, and the rabbi was taken by the historical allusions and aspects, and he had a way of taking modern times, so weaving it back into
To the
a
old.
biblical narrative, and he had a really way with words and context. So his rabbi was very impressed with it. Not only did he translate it to English, it's not in this one, I actually have it linked on the website, like in footnote form where each reference comes from the Tanakh.
Uh-huh.
They weren't just words.
They came from somewhere.
They were sourced.
He
So-
used the
Well, he was
Tanakh.
influenced by, Bialik also.
Bialik.
So he just had a way, and
Even his handwriting
you don't
is
see
somewhat
it.
Bialik.
Anyway, so if you want me to read, I'll
Yeah, I'd
read
like
it.
to hear
it.
All right. So
I
it says,
read it.
I'll just read from the middle, okay, more about his personal experience and more of how he did it. בפעם הראשונה דרכתי בחוצותייך ירושלים לפני 30 שנה. ראיתיך דמועה, כואבת, נוגה ועצבות פנים. אז גיבורי המחתרות חירפו נפשם ובעוז שתתו דם. נגד הכובשים כלכסי זרים הכלניות של בריטניה העם. נראה לי אז כבולה ונתונה בעזקים, וה-CID, which was the British intelligence, של הוד מלכותו הכתר הבריטי, בך מחזיקים. ובימים ההם הבריטי אז היה בארץ, אז. נתקענו מאוד ובעינויים איומים, לתקוות חירותנו בז. ראיתיך אז ירושלים מפוצלת, ובתוכה בווינגרד, מוקפת אלפי חיילים וטנקים של ג'נרל ברקר מכל עבר וצד. בשנת תש"ח, he was in quotes, אל נקמות הופיע. היינו דור ראשון להתחלתא דגאולה, בנייך ובנותייך התגייסו באהבת נפש לזו הפעולה, אך אחרי יום העצמאות עדיין נשארת חצויה בפגיון וגאווה. חומותייך בכוננות קרבית עמדו יחידות לליגיונרית ערב. ממינך גייסות עבדאללה, ובאמצע הפקר היה השטח. נסענו עינינו רחוק לכותל, בקלון, לען ומתח. לפני 10 שנים בדיוק, הסתערו בנייך בגבורה ולהב, לכבוש העיר העתיקה, נלחמו בהקרבה עצמית ובאהב, שחררו אותך משונאייך, אחדו גופך הפצוע, חברת יחדיו עיר שכולך זהב.
כולך זהב.
But and it goes on. But you see, he brought Tanakh, he brought Naomi Shemer into it.
Play on words, a play on words.
He brought, this he was very proud of, and this is what you were talking about Menachem Begin. He left this poem. He passed it to Menachem Begin in Rachell Shlomo on one Rosh Hashanah in 77, right after he wrote it. And Begin wrote back and we have a letter from Menachem Begin thanking him for the poem, and it was very interesting.
Just like you told the story of the armaments, it's funny, years later, the Thurm family, Myron, they were in the bakery business in Brooklyn also. So they found out I was Maidenbaum. They said, oh, your father, during the war, he used to do us the biggest favor. He was the only one we could get sugar and flour from. He was in the food business. He said, and he would come in bags and bags so we could keep our business going. So it was interesting to hear that. Yeah.
He was somebody who helped first.
He saw a need.
And made money second.
Yeah.
Right.
That was, he by his sheer strength of his ability to sell and make friends, he was a success.
Right. Remember, a Holocaust survivor came to him. I think it was Jay's father, Grunfeld's father. It was a story I had.
Yeah.
And he didn't know him at all, but he knew he went through the Holocaust. And he wanted to open up a supermarket, so my father was going to give him the goods. And he had no collateral and he had nothing. He says, just give me a handshake. So I once met him in one of the hotel lobbies in Yerushalayim, and he called me over to tell me the story about my father. He says, I didn't have to sign anything. He says, pay me when you can. For 3 months, you get all the goods, you know. And
that was his.
He did that with a few people.
That was his MO and how he built Met Food. And Uncle Lou told me this story. And he says, well, it was like this. The Maidenbaum, it was his. We had an Uncle Harry who came here even before them.
Right, he came first.
And by the time Abba came in the 30s, Harry somehow saved up a princely sum of $5,000, and he had the money, and at some point after Abba was here a couple of years, they went into the wholesale food business.
Right.
The two of them were partners, 50-50. And their father, Gedalia Maidenbaum, as the war was coming to an end, World War II, he says, now you got to take your brothers into the business. This is their youngest brother told me this story. He says, I just came back from the army, everyone was looking for a job, and your father gave me 11% of the business, the other two brothers 11% of the business. My father remained with a third, and Harry had a third.
Right.
He says, who had such a family? He got stock in the business and a job, but it was a family business, and they grew it, and their way of growing it wouldn't work today.
Of course not.
Because it could work, but you need more legal work. Back in the day, he was a greener, and every greener that came had on a handshake had 2 weeks of groceries,
right,
and opened up a Met Food store.
Right.
And
the franchise.
my father was very strong-willed.
Very strong.
Right?
He never yelled.
And Ima was very strong-willed.
And she yelled.
She yelled.
But it manifested in very different ways.
Yeah, I never heard.
He said what he had to say, and zehu.
That's it.
She got what she wanted one way or another.
Well, because he couldn't deal
But
with
if she'd listen and then do whatever she wanted to do.
But everything, she was smart. She had intelligent
she had a way of
thinking
getting-
also.
I would say about Abba that he never thought he was right about anything.
Really?
No, he knew he was right.
He knew exactly. That's what I thought. He knew he was right.
There was no debate.
Right.
It was like,
He was positive he was right.
But she never gave in. She didn't give up. You might never give up.
what he used to say.
But they shared so
What he
many
used to
ideas
say.
together.
If you wanted to get,
But he
if
said
you
he
wanted
gave
something
in to
done,
get her off his
he'd say,
back
why
after
do I have
all.
to do it?
But she was right.
What did he
Because I
say?
said so?
Because I said so.
Yes, I said so.
Yes, I remember that.
Or often he'd say, this is not a
Because I said
democracy.
so.
Around the Shabbos table.
Right, exactly.
Everybody would want something, he'd say,
I
it's
said
not a
no.
democracy.
And then once he didn't like the conversation, Zmiro started and
But how
banged
many
on the table,
families?
and that was it.
How many
That's
families
very
you know
true
that
about it.
sang
If you-
on Shabbat Palmach song?
Misaviv Yehom Asa'ar.
We thought
Those was
Zmiro was Yerushalayim Shel Zahav,
Or
Palmach,
Ba'arva
yeah, Piskat Har Tzofim,
Ruach
Ba'arva
Noshem
Something
Asim
about Chayalim Almonim.
Chayalim Almonim.
We sang Be'arvot HaNegev when we were 5 years old, crying about the woman. I mean, we were little and we were singing this at Shabbat.
Yeah.
Our friends used to come over, they would like be tongue-tied.
Our
I
friends
wa-
used to
but
say
we-
when they entered our house it wasn't America. They said, "You're
But-
not American."
But you know what? They were some of them were really influenced, like Mimi Feiner.
Yes.
She
Yeah.
said that it changed her whole life. She became.
What was most
Her parents
interesting
didn't know
is that
one
our
Zionistic at
friends
all.
came from more religious homes. They would tear sheets of toilet paper, but their names were Linda and Susan and Jane, and we had names like Rachel and Shalom.
No, but they weren't. They were very frum, but they weren't educated
Right,
in
they weren't
the
educated. They
intellectual
weren't Zionistic
way.
like we were. We were waving the Israeli flag. It's so funny that you said that about Abba. That you said Abba never thought he was right.
Right,
I said he
my
knew
best
he-
line about Abba.
I never heard you say that though, Shalom.
I say tell him.
But you never said it to me. But I said
But
he knew he was right.
He was a.
Abba had these
No,
dark
he
eyes.
had a confidence of.
His mother did a
You
great
wouldn't
job.
believe it.
She did
No,
such a
you
good
don't.
job
Well, she was like that
She
also.
whispered to each son, "I love you the best."
Tamar, she was like that to her.
Yeah.
She was
he had
the
a
boss.
tremendous, and he had a sense, especially when it came to anything Jewish, religious, Zionistic.
An academic.
He had a clear sense in his own mind of what was right and what was wrong. And if
No,
you're
great.
right, you're right. So don't argue with me because it's right and you're wrong.
No,
He was
but
very moral.
And he was
And
very
ethical.
intellectual and had a
Wow.
thirst for knowledge. He got an honorary doctorate from Yeshiva.
Yes, I think the one of the highlights of his life was right before
Right.
he died. He became a trustee of Yeshiva University.
oh, and he also
I-
brought
they were
in
master builders of
outsiders
Aryeh
in the
and-
food business. You know that Charlie Schreiber, remember?
Oh,
He wouldn't let them get away with not giving money to YU. I think he got Charlie Schreiber for $100,000
Whoa.
because he never gave money to any Jewish charity. So he said, if you're going to give, you're going to give it to
To
Yeshiva
YU.
University. He was at that
I will
dinner.
tell you one thing that I
Yeah.
feel like I was not the most obedient kid in the world, and I was
I
always.
was
I
obedient.
was not, and I was always rebellious. But the one thing that Abba was really happy with me about was that I went to Yeshiva to Cardozo Law School,
Right.
to Yeshiva University,
Yeah.
because
It was
when I
affiliated.
graduated high school, okay, he says, "You applying to YU?" I go, "No, I'm applying to University of Michigan." And I got
Sounds
into
like a
because
yeshiva.
because her husband went to Michigan. I just wanted to
So
figure out
it
how
was
do I get away
okay.
from New York, and I applied. I had no idea what Michigan was, and the way I got to go to Michigan, I said,
Well, Yaakov went.
Yaakov went to Michigan. He's a rabbi, so he let me go. But he really wanted me to go to YU,
Right.
so much so that I get a call. You know, I agreed to put in an application with the rest of my class, and I get an interview. And my father was friendly with everybody at YU from top to bottom. So, and he used to go to the Rosh Shir also. I forgot the guy who interviewed me.
Oh,
With
but-
the B? With the B?
I know who it is. I know who you mean.
But he interviewed
Maybe
me,
David
so I'm
would know.
sitting
He got
down there and he
married late.
says, so he says, why do you think you should go YU? Just because you're not Maidenbaum's son is not enough of a reason to go to YU. Why should? So by the time I already had an admission to Michigan, I knew where I was going. I was happy to be going. I said, listen, I don't mean to be disrespectful, but I'm only here because my father asked me to be here for the interview. I'm going to Michigan. That was the end of the interview. I got my acceptance about a day later.
But you see how he changed?
Did they accept you to YU?
What do you think? I think
But
would
you
have killed
see how
somebody
he-
if I didn't get accepted to Hawaii.
But you see how he
And
changed, Shalom, over the years?
He was
Because-
much easier on me.
Well,
You know why?
I'm the
Because
only one of the
why
four
I-
girls that didn't
Why I
go to
said I was
Stern.
obedient, because in the interview at the wedding, my wedding,
Yes.
if you listen to the record, they asked him, what do you think of your daughter Dassi? How was she growing up? She was obedient, always obedient. Now, when it came to go to college, after my first year at Hofstra with Aryeh, my father and mother applied for me. Aryeh was trying to get me to go, my brother, to Brandeis or some other school, and he took that and tore it up, and he said, you're accepted at Stern College, and you're going to Stern College. He didn't even give me an opportunity. I cried for like a whole night. But they said, you're going to Yeshiva University. And
Well,
that's
I
Well,
applied
Aryeh
to Brandeis,
tells
and I
me-
got into Brandeis, and I didn't get to go to Brandeis, but I went to Brooklyn College. I wasn't
But he was
going to
letting you
Stern.
go? He was letting you go to
No,
Brandeis?
of course not. He wasn't going to pay for it, but Brooklyn
Oh,
College
so-
was $50 a semester.
Okay, but he wouldn't-
I was able to afford that.
No, but in a way he was right. He said, a young girl like you to go away so
No,
far.
Abba and Ima weren't going to let me go to Brandeis.
No,
But my
not a
kids-
girl. Not a girl.
No,
But you were
I
out
told
in
Aryeh, I
Vegas
told
and
my,
you-
maybe I don't want to tell Aryeh stories, but I always tell Aryeh that story. I've told Aryeh
Right.
that story about
Abba Aryeh
About
told me,
Aryeh.
don't apply to Stern.
No,
because if
wait,
you
I
apply
told-
and get in, they'll make you go. I said, I'm not.
But I
applying."
didn't apply. They
I
did
know,
it for
but
me.
Ima and Abba learned already. They
From
And
there.
you were such a role model that I wanted to go to Stern
Yeah,
College. I
you
was
went
so
to Stern.
brainwashed. I wanted to go to
You
Stern
went to
College.
Stern and Oda went to Stern.
You learned literature and all really good stuff at Stern, the Hebrew
Yeah,
literature.
no, Stern now is a better school than it was in my
But
time.
when I tell Aryeh the story about me and YU, he
Yeah.
says, I got a better one for you.
Oh yeah, I know it's
He
a good
says,
story.
Abba came to me and he handed me a letter. Look, you got accepted to YU. He goes, but I didn't apply.
That's the same with me. That's the same with me.
He went for one day, I think, Aryeh. He
But-
went for one day. He said, I'm
Yeah,
not going. I don't
no,
like this
it's-
school. I'm not going.
But that's why I'm very happy. But contrast that with when I got into Cardozo, which was not that tough to get into, I'll tell you a secret, in 1975.
Yeah, but
He
it's-
But he
was
was so
happy.
happy, right? Because it was why you
79.
affiliated.
Right.
And then he
Right.
died a month
Yes.
later.
Yeah.
Right.
But he was like thrilled that I was
Right.
going
Right.
to.
At least he knew that you were going.
Well, when I had to go to when I went to graduate school and I got into Columbia, he said, you're not going to Columbia, you got to go to Wurzweiler, to YU. I said, why? He says, because this isn't going to be recorded public. You can't learn with the Goyim. You're a young girl.
Right, he was
you're young,
afraid.
You can't,
He was
you can't
afraid.
learn. You're not going to go to Columbia. I said, well, I'm not going to Wurzweiler. I said, and you know what? Under the new program, Wurzweiler lets in Goyim too.
Right.
So Ima was just so impressed with Columbia, she talked him into
Well,
it.
Columbia's
She did
a
not
much
want
better
him to go.
school.
Well, today, now Columbia, I wouldn't let my own children go to Columbia because it's so
That's right.
anti-Zionist.
Look, he got along. He was a CEO of a public company for a while. Medfood
Right, and
was bought by
DiGiorgio.
the Georgia
Yes.
one. So he was able to live
In both worlds.
in both worlds.
But he didn't want his
Very
children,
facile.
he did not want his
He-
children
but he
living in
was-
both
but
worlds.
He was afraid of the
he
exposure,
knew the
of
difference.
the influence.
Right.
The influence.
Look, we'd walk. So we grew up in Lawrence, right? So there's a part of Lawrence called the Back of Lawrence. Now it's filled with Orthodox Jews. When we were growing up, the Orthodox Jews did not live back
No,
there.
we just took bike rides there.
Okay,
you know?
beautiful old houses, conservative and non-Jews lived there. But one time we walked down Causeway, which is near the golf course,
Which is where you live.
and I think he was walking to someone else, and I looked at the golf course and I said, and I was thinking to myself, I said, Abba, why did you play golf? So he looked at me like I had three eyes, and he says, golf is for goyim. Every time I play golf with somebody, I tell them, this is my father thinks what about golf.
About cards. We never played cards.
We never had a deck of cards in the house.
Because
You
in
weren't allowed.
Poland, only the derelicts used to play cards and gamble. So my father-in-law taught me to play cards.
Yeah, Abba hated cards. There were things that were very
Not
simple.
even on Christmas Eve? They told them?
Right,
He was very, no,
No,
he was very
Fiddle,
Maybe
maybe
like
in Poland, but
trailer
not
park.
here.
There were things that he was very
were allowed to
religious.
play war.
He was
Yeah, but
he was
not
always very
really.
pragmatic. He was
I
religious,
remember
but
owning a pair of
he adapted very well. Like if he had to travel, have fruit or
You pull out a
tuna
can
or
of
something.
sardines on the
Yeah, I mean, he was very practical like that.
He
But-
traveled through Europe. He took us to nice places,
But
but
he always had his can of sardines, right?
yeah,
and tuna and always
said
with
that.
him.
He would let us eat
But
like
you-
fish, but he wouldn't. He would take out his can of sardines.
You know what? It was interesting. My friends in Lawrence, most of them were very American, and once they got to know me and came to the house, they said, "Your father, how come he has such an accent?" And I said, "No, he doesn't. He doesn't have an accent." You know, it was like,
You don't notice? You know, I swear I never thought it.
I never thought he did
Although-
either, until he got up to publicly speak once.
Yeah.
And Tamar and I were sitting at the table, and Ima said, "Shh, Abba's speaking." I said, "That's not Abba."
Right.
I said, "That's not Abba." Yes, it's Abba. And the microphone accentuated his accent. I never knew till I was about 11.
Whenever he was at an event, like a charity event or anything, he'd on the spot like write a poem about the speaker. It was a real
hand
talented.
it to him.
But I have a note that he passed to somebody that he wants to speak, and then he'd write "Bli shvachim." He goes like, "Don't introduce me. I just want to read my poem, and don't make a big deal out of me."
But he also wrote poems to people when he was angry at them.
Oh, yes.
Oh, yes.
You know, he would
He
write a
was-
very pointed poem describing what he thinks this person said wrong or did wrong, and
Right.
very
But he would never
intellectual
yell.
language also.
He
Yeah.
could
That's-
rip you apart with a look and with
Or a
his
word.
pen.
But never
I
loses
mean,
temper.
he had some talent for writing, like, and he was probably one of the only people in the shul we grew up in, which was an Orthodox shul, but many of its members were not.
They play golf.
They weren't. They didn't have the same background as he did, for sure. And he had this love-hate relationship with the rabbi.
Yes.
Copperman,
Yeah.
Yeah.
who was a very bright guy. He just died in his 90s.
He's a
He was a
lovely
rabbi
man.
growing up. But I have letters between Abba and Rabbi Klarman. And
Right.
the best letters before I was born. Okay, it was in 56, 57.
And I was angry at him.
He was
angry.
super angry.
Because he wasn't gathering the youth to be Zionists.
No,
No,
let me
it
tell
was
my
about
story.
a speech.
He was
He wrote
angry about him about 10 things, okay? But what
That
was
was speech the rabbi gave,
well, first of all, just from sort of like a halachic thing, he was on the ritual committee, and women had pocketbooks. He would write letters about that. What kind of Orthodox rule is this?
How about the Yom Kippur dance?
Or
What?
no, he'd
Yes, it was the
also
Yom Kippur dance.
They have the Yom Kippur.
he'd be upset. He'd be upset. He'd be upset about a lot of things in Beth Shalom, right? But one of the things that upset him early on, out of the letter, that I wasn't born yet, I was in 56, was he had a way of writing Musar, and then at the end writing, "But if you do this and this, it'll work out great." He never ended on a sour note, but when in the letter he could dismantle you very easily. So he wrote Clapperman a letter. He goes, "At 6:30 this morning, my phone rang, like usual, and
Oh,
Rabbi
I remember that.
Glatzer,
I remember
this
the
one?
story, yeah.
Rabbi Glatzer
Minion.
Yeah.
he was a Holocaust survivor, but he was the shaman of
Gabbai.
of the shul. And he says, like usual, the Glatzer told me, "We need you for the minion." So he goes, "I got dressed quickly." He goes, "We need you for the 10th," he said. So I got dressed quickly, and I got into shul, but lo and behold, Rabbi Glatzer miscounted. I was only the 9th. And everyone looked around, and nobody will say it, but I'll say it. Where was Rabbi Clapper? Right, so-
Rabbi Glatman didn't come to the meeting.
No, he didn't go to the meeting.
Oh,
So he
that's
says,
not
and he
good.
writes, "You're the leader of the congregation in a growing community. How come you're not here?" And da da da. And the reason Abba was angry because it wasn't rhyming. It was a letter. When he was really pissed, it would
Wrote
be
a
a
letter.
Hebrew letter. He didn't have the time for a rhyme. But when he wanted to be creative, everything was expressed
Oh, God.
through poetry.
The truth is, we didn't appreciate enough when we were younger, you know.
I
We
never
gleaned a lot
appreciated
by
it.
osmosis and
Right.
by living
Yes.
there,
Yes.
which at times we were at odds with it,
That's-
but we didn't really appreciate what we got from our
We
father.
we learned Hebrew like people didn't learn Hebrew
No.
in those days, because I would sit in shul with him. It was much. I had an interview when we put out that, and I was talking about Abba, and the guy quoted me, but it's very true. He was much more. When I was davening with him, he would say, "What does that mean?
Right,
What is it?" And he'd tell me the
Yes.
source of this is. He didn't care if I missed 3 or 4 things. He
Want
said
you to
it's more
understand.
important to you to know what you're saying
Yes.
than to just say it blindly.
Well, he tested us at the
And I
Shabbos
do that
table.
with-
Right.
We had to understand every word of the Zmirot we were
Right.
singing. He would
Remember you used to
stop.
say, Yerushalayim, Karta de Shufraya.
Right. Also,
But that's
the
Aryeh.
apple of your
That's
eye.
not Hebrew.
That's right.
The apple of your eye. Remember, Kavavat Eye.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He taught us a lot just through that. And by the way, he sent us to Mossad. camps.
Oh, we weren't allowed to
Histadrut.
write letters home during the summer if they weren't in Hebrew, by the way.
But he
We
was
had to
very
write
involved
Hebrew
with
letters.
Histadrut, right?
Nothing in
Rachel?
English.
Wasn't he involved with Histadrut?
Yes.
That was Masad.
Ema worked for Histadrut.
Well, when I
But
got to
Abba,
Israel, I
that was
spoke
my
Hebrew
size.
that nobody understood me. My kids made fun of me. I had to start learning Hebrew the way Israelis, because I used to say, Matzacha. And Ima, nobody speaks like that.
Or Efo had Simriyah.
Or if somebody was sick, I said,
Anochi.
oh, chazart le'etanech. And they said, Ima, just say, Hashlomcha. Just say, chazart le'etanech. I said, that's the way we want to
Yesh li tzina.
Right, yeah. And then instead of Ani Mitzunedet.
Yeah.
Our Hebrew
I gotta
is
give
our
my side
side.
credit because they try to reinvigorate Hebrew, and today it's a joke. Nobody speaks like.
Did you ever hear
I
Shlomo
listen.
Schulzinger? No, from Masad.
She just died. Rivka
He ran Masad.
I know
Like his-
my grandmother went to my
Oh,
son,
yeah. What was your grandmother's name?
Alphabet.
Rubinsky, but she's older. She was my grandmother is
Be careful when you say older around.
Exactly.
she was born in 1929.
Oh,
she is older.
No,
Okay.
we
You're
were
okay.
allowed to go to Masad for
Oh.
many years. I wouldn't
That's
send
where our
us
Hebrew
anywhere
was
else.
really.
You know, I went to Maple Lake one summer where I happened to meet my husband that summer, but he came on visiting day and he said, "What kind of camp is this? They make announcements in English." You know,
This is how we woke up with Kim, my side. Boker Tov Kibbutz HaEmet. Boker Tov Kibbutz HaGalil. Nala Bosch.
השעה 6:30.
Yes.
no?
Nala Bosch. Big
Message
day.
of your
Nala
Machut,
Babesh,
you know,
Geshem.
Sagriri, you know.
Yes, and she would tell you exactly. We learned
But
every
they ran
word.
it like Israel. The
Right.
Galil was up,
The Kinneret was the lake.
and
the
the boys were in the
Lazol.
Emek. We learned
Lazol.
history and geography of Israel without even being aware of it.
Right.
And every bunk had
Every
a Hebrew,
plane that we put on was in
kibbutz.
Hebrew.
But every bunk had a name of a kibbutz or a
Geza,
moshav.
Shoresh, Anaf.
No, the bunks.
Right.
Right.
So
I remember
Yoel
that, I don't
Tashachar,
remember.
Yes,
right.
yeah. And we had to learn about each kibbutz and each section and have a shelet about it. You know,
I mean,
so
we
he-
learned to love the Hebrew language.
No, but he
to really
educated
love
us in the summer.
You know what? He had a that's just not a
Passion. It was.
You could almost feel the emotion of the words when he said.
Someone called him a Renaissance man.
Even when I laned, you know, when I laned,
Oh yeah.
it was like you can't just lane. You have to
Do it right.
you have to understand what you're saying and in context say it. So when I laned,
And he couldn't bear the Hebrew language not spoken correctly.
Right.
See, my husband didn't speak. He sang. He was a Baltfila, but my father would say, "Oh, it hurts my ears." To the
Yeah,
pronunciation.
mil el and mil ra, if you didn't get it right. In fact, in one of the in one of his Nirot, we all sing it wrong.
We
We
sing
sing
it
it
right,
right,
but
but nobody
Birkat
else.
Hamazon.
Not Birkat Hamazon.
No, I know.
I know.
Milchav
Or like instead of saying
Yehudim.
or la Yehudim, we had to say or la Yehudim,
Yehudim.
and the whole rhyme went awry because you know
We had to pay more attention to the dictum.
Yeah.
TikTok was key.
Tiktok.
Even when I landed, I remember my pasha was lachla, so there's one thing Vayodof Adan. He would stop every time. No, that's wrong. It's Vayodof Ad Dan. you couldn't, it used to drive me crazy, but to this day.
Now you say
Now you got it right.
Okay. So this is an amazing thing. That's one of the things that says Tofes on it. It's written on the back of an envelope that he wrote himself, and he sent the original off to Poland to his brother.
He didn't want him to
Yaakov.
marry. He didn't want him to marry Ruth. Is
No.
that
We're on tape.
No, I know. He sent him a letter. He said, "I'll give you the money, but Ma doesn't want you to marry."
Well, this was evidently after that.
Right.
Okay, this says
right.
It says Yaakov, his brother's Jack, Yaakov. Michtav, and he had this relationship with his brother where I guess I don't know.
The brother's
Jack's older. Jack's older.
Jack's older. So he was. Our father was the middle child, but he was not the classic middle child. He was very sure of himself,
And he was
and
smart.
And he
that-
took charge.
He
And
was the
he took
smartest.
charge.
I think he was the smartest of everyone.
Some of our uncles who weren't religious, and he brought in the business, like Aunt Esther, was that he would take issue with them that they didn't send their kids to yeshiva.
Yeshiva.
Like, what's it his business? But he felt it was his responsibility to do that. So he wrote to his brother at his mother's instruction in July 30th, 1934, okay? If a year after Hitler came, shortly after Hitler came back. Yaakov Michtav Ima Tsaruf Bazeh. Kra'ehu v'havinehu kehogen kedat ben yakir v'ne'eman. So he evidently had instructions
Of
for
his
him
mother
about
to
getting
read
married.
it carefully.
Now, he understands something. Ruth was his her uncle married the cousin,
First
I guess.
cousin.
But in order for her to get a visa, he had to get married in Poland, but not necessarily religiously, just civilly. So that was what this letter was about. It said, Ikar ha'ikarim, kabel et harishionot ha'erusim, v'gam ha'nesuim, mitam ha'memshala. V'ach ha'chatuna al pi tekas ha'yehudi titkayem b'Amerika, be'et she'rivka tavohena. Isn't that interesting? Ani rak miva'er lecha et hamatzav. Ach eini mifaked alecha, ki mi ani.
Which means not ordering you.
Which means listen to me.
He treaded carefully with his brother. He goes, rak, okay, then this is the most interesting part of the letter. Rak tseil agum hamis sovev alai admod b'v'chol makom yiter. Okay, that was, he was just saying that he was, that I'm not sure what that meant, but he wasn't, something about being depressed. But then he talked about B'shterot Nicholas HaKadosh, which means St. Nicholas Avenue.
Right.
Okay, in Brooklyn, Hakol Kahogen, Hamifaked Poked Al Sarei Halafim, Al Sarei Hameod, V'shiltono, Mutzak Yoter Me HaConsular B'Vienna. He's saying everything's going well in Brooklyn. But then he says, remember, 34, Shamoa Shamati me'evarei ha'itonim, itonaim ha'amerikaim, ki milchama olamit mimashmeshet uba'a, lachen im tirtzeh, maher, v'sader et ha'inyanim, v'gam et etzem ha'inyan, what he described above, va'aroz et chafatzcha, v'emor shalom le'Europa ha'midra ra'emet.
Oh my God.
Okay, Drishat Shalom Avor Rivka, and then on the bottom he writes, Eila Hadvarim Tevu Vave Doar B'Mehirut.
Of course.
So they already knew in 34.
I have a few things like that he wrote. In 1934, and I'm convinced it's like sort of like Iran today, there were people who paid attention to the politics of what was going on. 1934, he was saying they're talking about World War. Here's another letter he wrote to a friend of his that he said, says how that was when he was 19 in 1932 or 33, right after Hitler. I think it was even before Hitler came to power.
Hitler in 33 was already.
Well, but he wrote him. He says, "How's the class? How's things in Poland?" He goes, and then he writes, "Manasel Hitler Hazeh." He writes, and so there was awareness among Jews.
Brother.
The question is whether how seriously they took him.
Well, Bialik wrote letters to the communities in Eastern Europe, that, and Abba took Bialik to heart. Yes. And he said that you should be leaving.
He said, Tagit Shalom L'Europa. Say goodbye to Europe.
If Savta Chaitra didn't leave at that time, within 2 or 3 years after, they closed the borders. They wouldn't have been able to get out. So she was smart too, that she said, I'm going to listen to my brother who knows better than I do.
Yes. Right.
Otherwise we wouldn't be sitting here.
The Peterseils never...
I guess a lot of people just didn't take Germany.
They didn't believe it was going to happen.
They also had a good life.
He also wrote about Polish politics. He wrote about the Polish generals and stuff.
It was hard to
he wrote about the Italian. I mean, he was very astute politically.
Even in America, he read the New York Times. He knew what was going on, as well as he knew Gemara and Tanakh.
And we have books. We have books of Hatzofer HaMizrahi from the 1920s and 30s that report on Jewish life.
He never discussed it with us. I must tell you.
I don't think he hid it as much as he just... It wasn't part of the paragraph.
Very close.
No, Shalom, he didn't want to bring up this subject. In fact, why did we not know that you are named after Ima's uncle who died in the Holocaust, and Ima was very close to the cousin's son that we knew very well, and we had no idea how he was related. We had no idea you were named after. Why? Because Abba didn't want to bring up
anything that
Shalom was killed in the Holocaust. We didn't know the word Holocaust.
Right.
You see, he had no trouble telling me that they put money together for like Sam Crystal and
Right.
That was years
That
later.
was other
Shalom.
people, but not.
But Shalom,
nothing
you
to
were
do-
years later,
He wasn't
too.
related to Sam. Sam
I
wasn't a
know.
relative.
I didn't
That
think
wasn't
he was.
another person
Thank
gave a
God.
visa
He
for.
gave a visa for somebody he
And
didn't
he
even
took
know.
care of him, and the guy had mental
him into
problems.
business,
and
yeah.
put him in- he really suffered during the war. He was
Yeah.
a kid.
He wrote to him in Latin. Do you know that?
Right.
No.
Abba knew Latin
Abba
very
knew
well.
Latin, math. I mean, he was well educated in Poland. And then he became a peddler because
Well, they had-
Because he
lack
didn't
of
have the dorm
opportunity.
room money.
Look, the same reason why all the greener went into the supermarket business, and most of them who made lots and lots of money did it
Or the
because
Schwarzer business.
because they wound up buying the real estate under the store.
Right.
You had a lot of very smart Europeans
Yes.
who came here
Bought up real
with their
estate.
lives were
Yeah.
interrupted by the Holocaust, and unless they didn't have an education, but I think our family was very helpful in setting them up in business, and it was mutually beneficial.
But Abba was also very in tune to Israel in the sense of bringing. He was one of the first people, I think, that brought Osem and Telma
You
To
could-
America.
and Aviv Matzot. He
He
packed
brought-
up the station wagon and
Yes.
took us around to drop it
Right,
off
to-
at
what's the
neighbors. They
name-
should taste
what was the
Israeli
name from
food.
Osem? We remember.
No,
At the funeral.
Dannenberg was the one from
Dannenberg was
Dannenberg and
Aviv.
Schechter, right?
Right.
No, Dannenberg and Schechter.
Whatever happened to their children and their children?
Oh, they were at the funeral.
One was Dahlia.
Right, that's right. And
Right.
David was one, I remember.
Wait a minute.
Here,
In
this is,
after
this
1967, Shalom, tell him what Abba did after 1967. We were supposed to meet. He met with Peres. Peres was then the economic minister. He was very young. He decided after the 67 war to bring a lot of business into Israel.
Right.
Here.
He got together a lot
Look
of
at
investors.
this article.
He also
It's,
had this guy, Aryeh,
He was
remember? Redhead.
Yes,
he
yes, I
lost a
do.
fortune bringing in Israeli products here. He was the first person who brought in Aviv Matzot to America. But Israel he helped start Sunfrost Food here.
Right. He brought
Frozen
in frozen
food.
food
He,
here.
he was anything Israeli he was eager to do. But back in those days, like Sunfrost, a lot of the Israelis still had fresh. Not
That's
everyone
true.
had the freezers
Freezers.
back then in the 60s. So, and Aryeh went into
Yeah, he
business.
had a lot of
and
foresight to do that. Too bad he didn't keep
He had
his
the first
holdings.
movie theater in Ashdod.
He also thought of the diaper business, remember? He wanted to
Yes.
set up like a diaper business,
Yes.
like they had in America, where they deliver diapers and pick them up.
I know people were
Although
still
this is,
struggling.
do you know what this is? That?
No.
That's,
one, this?
no, the other one.
Oh, this is one Hakamata Medina,
Yes,
48.
right.
This
He was
is,
taking.
Aryeh has the original cardboard piece of that.
Yeah, he was
Okay, that's a
listening to
photo.
the
Voting.
radio to see what the votes
On
were.
a piece of cardboard, he was keeping track of the
But
votes.
the UN votes. Guatemala put Israel
Yes.
over the top.
Yes, Elba tells me that
Yes.
all the time.
Guatemala.
That's Guatemala.
But you can just
Guatemala
imagine
just had
listening
about
to it
terrible
on the
volcanoes.
radio.
Yes,
and,
When? I didn't.
Cheer.
Days ago.
Why they might put
I
it
think
on
that's a
Hawaii.
good,
Hawaii
I
worse.
know that.
and November
Yes.
29th is that's a good,
Tough type of
November,
November,
but
right.
Guatemala was the country that put
Right.
Israel over the top. They suffered a terrible volcano a few days ago.
right.
And Israel gave money to.
Yeah.
Guatemala's also
Not
transferring
money.
their embassy to
Right, they were
Jerusalem
also
with
the first.
Ecuador and with
Peru? Was it Peru?
But look what happened to
I met
our
with them.
soccer
I met
game.
with
Look
the-
what
we
look,
went
look
to
what
three
Argentina
functions.
just did.
Right.
Which one?
Everybody was so hyped up about this game that Argentina was going to play
Yeah,
in
what
Israel before
happened?
the World Cup.
What happened
It was
with
terrible.
Argentina?
Why don't we, I just want to
Okay.
kind of wrap
up.
a little bit on. He passed away
June 79.
June of
He
79.
passed away doing the thing he loved
Yes,
best,
reading a Hebrew poem.
reading a Hebrew poem
In front of the
public.
Aron Kodesh. My husband was
front.
being installed as president of the
Right.
yeshiva, held, and my father decided he's going to read a poem, as usual. And he got up, it was a base medrash there, and it was in front of the Aron Kodesh, and he read the poem. Before the last four
He was
lines,
faltering a little.
he keeled
His heart.
over,
Yeah, and that was it.
and that was it.
But he did.
But he was supposed to be leaving for Israel that week,
That
right?
day,
Or the-
I
This
He
was
had-
his third heart attack in a year.
Right,
Yeah.
yes.
Last
But he was
And he
supposed
always
to
said, "I don't want to go to Eretz Yisrael in an aron. I want to live there."
Call me mute, he said,
Yeah.
I want to
It
go
was
call
his
me
second
mute.
heart attack. The one in the middle was water on the lungs.
They told him that
On
morning that he
Memorial
was
Day.
All I
fine.
know is, remember when he was in the hospital? Look,
It was Memorial Day.
There was always a poem for every
Right,
day.
even in the
Okay,
hospital.
you have that one, right? You got
Right,
like-
he's Sariti
Yes.
and
Right,
Elohim.
right.
Yeah.
He had a heart attack and he
Almost
pulled
died.
through it.
Yeah.
And we're all waiting in the waiting room. He passes out a note.
Said I fought with the
He
angel.
Sar-
of death."
Sariti
he quoted-
and Elohim.
Yeah, in Hebrew,
Sariti
yeah, that
ma'aseh
was
vayuchalo, he goes.
Yes,
He was
right.
very angry at the doctors.
Well, because they told him he had a heart attack. He didn't want him to have a heart
They were
attack.
the messengers who said, don't tell me that.
Yeah.
I don't want to hear that.
Yeah.
He was,
And they
So
wouldn't
he
let him
did
have a
what he
phone,
wanted.
so he got somebody
Yes.
to give him about
He
$10
gave somebody-
worth in coins, and he walked out of his hospital bed and
No,
started
he
doing
did the opposite.
business.
He gave somebody a $10 bill and he got a
Somehow it was
dollar worth.
Uncle Normie.
And he got a dollar worth.
Of dimes.
Dollar worth of
Uncle
dimes.
Normie.
He said
Uncle
to Uncle
Normie.
Normie,
Yeah.
who visited in the hospital, they wouldn't let him have a phone.
So he went down with his IV, he went down to the lobby and he used the payphone.
'Cause they
Yeah,
wouldn't let
but
him
he
have a
told
phone in
Normie,
their
he goes,
room.
don't come back here without a roll of dimes.
He also, from ICU, he convinced the nurses to give him a phone
Oh, that I
to
didn't
call
hear.
somebody in the business. Not that he was having a heart attack, he just to tell them I have influenza.
Influenza.
Influenza. He was like
The
a
first
But
bad-
you want to hear
Yeah.
something incredible? His father
Yeah,
died.
that's some story.
Yeah, I'm a little worried. I got Zaidi, Abba. I'm waiting for some dramatic death.
But
God
that's
forbid.
not going to happen.
But 19, and you can't make this up. You have
have a
Tamar
picture.
has the article laminated. What year?
Yeah.
1960, I think it was. 1960.
1961, I think.
It was 61.
61.
Our
I
grandparents
can't fill in. I
came
don't
to
remember.
Israel.
No, but
To be
tell them
there
what
for
happened.
for Rosh
They
Hashanah.
decided, my grandfather, my father's father, said, I want to go to Israel
The second visit.
for the Chagim, right, for the holidays. And his daughter and the son said, you know, Pa, it's very fast now to make reservations. It's too quick, and it's hot there. Maybe wait till after, you know, the Chagim, and then you'll go. And he said, no, it's Min Shamayim. I want to go to Israel.
And he went to they made him go to get checkup.
They went to the doctor, and the doctor said everything's
Okay.
fine.
It's
So,
100%
but listen how it gathered. Everyone gathered on Manor Lane in our house. All the aunts and uncles in those years. Everyone went to the airport. You know, you waved goodbye. Everybody came to say goodbye. I remember kissing him goodbye. And they get a phone call. As soon as he hit Israel and landed, he leaned down to kiss the ground and said, "I'm so happy to be here," and he dropped dead.
On the tarmac.
Yeah.
And he had a heart attack, died on the tarmac, and he's buried in Bnei Brak.
Yeah, the
There's
Chazon
an
Ish.
article all about it. Next to 6 rows away from the Chazon Ish. No, not
sounds-
6 rows, right near.
Right near
Right
him.
near
That's how we
next
found his
door,
grave in the
yeah.
dark. Remember? Weren't you with us when we found his grave in the dark?
I don't know.
At
I know I got
It's-
finished him and Safta.
And Savta. So that was a very. It's almost like he felt that he had this.
The
yeah.
premonition.
And then my father said also he had a heart attack like 10 days before he died, actually. And he said to me in the hospital, I really felt badly because it's Shavuos and I didn't want the family to have a hard time on Shavuos to take me to Israel to
Right.
bury me.
Right.
He said, so I waited. And he had his Tanakh open. When he died, his Tanakh was open to where Chizkiyahu, remember he was afflicted and he was going to die and he davened and God gave him years so that he could see time to see his children gather around him. And he was open to that parak on his night table.
They didn't have a heart attack. He had water on the lungs 3 weeks before he died.
4 weeks exactly, because it was Shavuos. And he
Yeah,
had
no,
to
it
pay
was
the
on
fine.
Memorial
Right,
Day,
right, right.
June 19th.
You know what it was? He was about 5 years too early between stents and
Right, they were
bypasses.
too
Right, they didn't have
They didn't
the
have it then.
technology.
They just
then.
didn't have. He had a ballooning, and that was like a 3-day procedure or something.
And the echocardiogram that he had the day of his death, they didn't give results that minute like they do
Right.
now.
That was,
It was 3 days later, they said one muscle of the heart wall was
But there
gone.
was more than that. It said he was living on one muscle.
Oh.
Yeah, he was missing 3. All right, look.
Anyway, that's basically it.
This has
been a nostalgic-
fascinating, really very, very
nostalgic.
interesting.
Thank you
very much.
for doing it. It was like
We
talking
were
about parents.
like,
Right.